Hey, everyone, keep that applause going, please. Hey, everyone, keep the applause going for our musician who was amazing. Felix Hagen. He's from the Olivier and Tony Award-winning musical Operation Mincemeat. His show is currently on Broadway and on the West End at the Fortune Theater. Please go see it. Another round of applause. Fantastic. We're so lucky to have him. It's nice to see you all here. I'm going to give you a minute to take your seats and get settled. But we have to get going. We have a very tight program today, but it's going to be very exciting. My name is Danny Nierenberg. I am president and co-founder of Food Tank. Thank you. For those of you who don't know us, we're a research and advocacy organization really devoted to highlighting stories of hope and success in our food and agriculture systems around the globe. I am so excited to be here for our third annual London Climate Week Chief Sustainability Officer and Food System Funder Summit and London Climate Action Week. Give that a round of applause. 3 years in a row. A huge, huge thanks to our friends at Google Cloud for hosting today's summit, and thanks to everyone joining in person online. Round of applause for those folks. I have a lot of partners to thank, so just bear with me. But this couldn't have happened without all of them. The UN Environment Program, London Climate Action Week, Kinisla, PAI, Strong Roots, Compass Group, the Alliance for Biodiversity International and SEAT, WWF, Tapestry Foundation, the Landscape Alliance, the Institute for Food Technologists, and the production team in the back. Give them a round of applause, everyone. So before we get started, I want to talk a little bit about what transformation in our food and agriculture systems can look like. Over the last 2 decades, I've had the enormous privilege of traveling around the world, meeting farmers, food producers, scientists, entrepreneurs, policymakers, and community leaders. And what I've learned is that the most important stories are rarely the loudest ones. Several years ago in India, I spent time with women farmers who were experimenting with new ways to grow food and improve nutrition in their communities. They weren't waiting for a government program or breakthrough technology. They were sharing knowledge with one another, testing ideas, experimenting, and creating change where they lived. I spent a whole day with them, sort of interrogating them about their lives. At the end of the day, when I closed my notebook, they started asking me questions. They wanted to know how farmers in other parts of the world were dealing with the climate crisis and soil health. And it was a really good reminder to me that transformation doesn't always happen through big, dramatic moments. More often, it happens through thousands of small actions that spread from community to community, neighbor to neighbor, from farm to farm. That's the kind of mass incremental change Food Tank tries to elevate and amplify. More recently, I was just in Ethiopia with farmers, researchers, and development practitioners about the consequences of the dramatic reductions in international aid. They described the impacts of America's decision to dismantle USAID, and I quote, this is exactly what they said. They said the effects were immediate and disastrous, and honestly heartbreaking. Programs disappeared, support systems collapsed, communities that had spent years building resilience suddenly found themselves facing enormous uncertainty. And while it's very easy to focus on the decisions made by the United States, many, many countries are pulling back. Democracies around the world, including here in the United Kingdom, Germany, France, and others, are reducing aid commitments at a moment when climate change, hunger, conflict, and instability are increasing. What struck me when I was in Ethiopia wasn't just the scale of the challenge. It was how quickly people on the ground were trying to adapt. Again, the story isn't simply about crisis. It's about resilience. It's about innovation. It's about determination. Those experiences reinforce something I believe deeply, that the stories we tell matter. And that's why we're here today, to hear the stories of farmers, stories of innovation, stories of resilience, stories of transformation, stories of the love of the land, and stories that bring us hope. You'll hear how researchers at the Landscape Alliance and the Alliance for Biodiversity and SEAT are helping farmers strengthen climate resilience. You'll hear how Aldi, Ahold Delhaize, and Whole Foods Market are helping eaters make healthier, more sustainable choices, how Whole Chain is bringing greater transparency to food supply chains. And many of the innovators are driving change in this room. Project Dandelion is elevating women-led climate solutions. The TCA Accelerator is advancing true cost accounting. WRAP is helping build a more circular economy by reducing food loss and food waste. And many of you are really working towards bringing innovations that have meaningful change. So I hope you'll stay after the event. We have a wonderful reception planned for you where you can make new connections and learn from one another. Before we begin, I just have to do a little housekeeping. We are bringing together incredible farmers, business leaders, funders, advocates, and many more. To make sure we hear from everyone, our panels will be very fast-paced and dynamic. Today's agenda will be followed by that reception and a wonderful performer from Cabaret. You're not allowed to leave. You have to stay for the reception, everyone. So we have a short break built in, and so please feel free to step out when you need to. I also hope you'll share your favorite moments throughout the evening using the hashtag Food Tank, the hashtag London Climate Action Week LCAW 2026, and handle @FoodTank on all social media channels. We'll be replying to your comments throughout the day. So now to get started, it's my pleasure to introduce our partner, Kasha Faber, a principal industry architect at Google. Please give her a round of applause.
Thank you, Dani. On behalf of Google and Google Cloud, I really want to thank you. I'm really proud to be here with you, with the whole Food Tank team, Compass Group, and all the partners that made this event possible. And welcome to all of you. Welcome in our Google Cloud office. It's an amazing office. We have air conditioning, so on such a hot day, yes, everybody is quite pleased with that. A couple of words from me. There are a couple of elements on the agenda that I'm really looking forward to. And in particular, because I represent technology, this is what I do on a daily basis. As a principal architect, I talk to retailers, I talk to grocers, I talk to brands. So this event is an incredible opportunity to really hear voice from the gatekeepers, from people from the ground, and see how challenges look like in practice. So understanding this practical point of view really helps me also in my job. It helps Google build better platforms, provide better solutions to all of you. And especially, I'm looking forward to the voice of farmers. That's one of the things that is really close to my heart to understand really the farm, the ground, and these challenges related with soil, because this is all that we rely on. Last but not least, I'm really looking forward to hear from our Google Cloud partner, Picterra CEO, Pierrick. Picterra developed the geospatial AI platform. I won't be really talking about technology much, I promise, but I need to make sure that you all understand how groundbreaking recent changes to this platform have been, and they will allow a number of people, number of decision makers to actually get the tools that will bring not only dashboards, not only data faster to their hands, but will help them together with the Google Cloud Platform, but also Gemini and agentic technology, bring through the reasoning that the models enable, that the that the models that we, like for example Gemini, bring to really everybody, not only technologists, not only business analysts, not only IT team, but really to everybody, to get those insights and to enable also decision. Because models are not only to have a chat with them, they are also to act based on and really help people make this decision and act on those challenges within supply chain, within procurement. So I'm hoping to hear a lot about this from Pierrick, and I really hope to have a chat at the end of the event. I really encourage you to connect with me. You can find me on LinkedIn, but also to talk to us, to Google Cloud, and see how we can help you resolve those challenges. So again, welcome to our Google office, and enjoy the event. I hope you will have a lot of good memories.
Thank you, Kasia. Google Cloud has been such an incredible partner, and so we're so grateful for them. We're going to dive into the first panel of the day, which will offer some context for today's conversations as we talk about London Climate Action Week and why it's so important in the build-up to COP31 in November. So joining, we have Helen Clarkson, the CEO of Climate Group. Please give her a round of applause as she makes her way to the stage. Hey, Helen, how are you? We have Nick Mabey, the CEO of E3G and the chair of the London Climate Action Week Steering Group. Hey, Nick. So I'm so delighted to be with you both. Thank you so much for all of the work that you have done. Nick, if I can start with you, the world looks pretty different than it did a few years ago in lots of different ways. In some ways, climate action is a little bit more difficult. But in a lot of ways, it's also creating a lot of new opportunities. Can you talk a little bit about what those new opportunities look like?
Yeah, I think you can see it here today. Firstly, yeah, the world's harder. The US is not just out of the system, it's pushing back hard on the system. And there needs to be some places we used to get things done, like the G7 and G20 are much harder places. But actually what you see here at London Climate Action Week is really big new coalitions forming around things like electrification, resilience. I was just at a meeting with a whole set of different countries. In a sense, just finding new ways to connect and cooperate and move forward. And just a number of non-state actors here. So we've got governors, we've got mayors from around the world, and also from the US. Got a big contingent from America's all in.
Our mayors are still okay.
Oh yeah, they're having a lot of fun. They're all complaining about the air conditioning. But apart from that, it's fine. Yeah, so I think that's really powerful. The other thing is, of course, the Strait of Hormuz, the Iran war, which is the backdrop of everything here, and it's obviously the backdrop on food, it's the backdrop particularly on energy, and just the energy summit we did with the Secretary General and a whole set of ministers and CEOs earlier on Tuesday. There's incredible energy. I mean, every oil shock ends up with a big boost in alternative energy and efficiency, but this one, we now have incredibly much better technologies to move forward, and I'm expecting to see a huge boost. So, in fact, that's one of the things we want to take from here to Antalya is that huge push on electrification, really practical to move forward. And so it's one of the things that's most exciting about this week. So I think it's going to probably bounce to New York next and then to Antalya, where we hopefully will see some big progress.
That's great. Thank you so much. Before I turn back to Helen, Hongpeng Lei is the chief of the Climate Mitigation Branch and the Climate Change Division at the UN Environment Program. Please give him a round of applause for being able to join us. So Helen, coming back to you, Climate Week gatherings like this one are crucial to mobilizing action, as we all know. How can they help catalyze that leadership that Nick wants to see?
Yeah, so thank you. It's really interesting. So we run, Climate Group runs Climate Week NYC, which it's happened about last 17 or 18 years or something in New York. We run it alongside the UN General Assembly. So you've got that moment where you've got all the UN leaders in town. As Nick said, it sort of forms kind of almost like a bounce of the ball. Now we've got London happening now, New York, COP. So on one level, you have that kind of international momentum happening.
Right.
You've got a moment where leaders come together. It can act as a sort of forcing moment. So we've had quite big announcements on stage. We had one a couple of years ago where literally backstage we had Gavin Newsom announcing something on stage, the governor of California, and his team in the green room were cheering because they didn't know he was going to announce it, and they've been pressuring. So there's this moment where they get up on stage, they're like, oh, I better commit to this, and go for it. And then you can use the next sort of moment to check in on did they do it. So it acts for them. And then it's sort of all other kind of levels of society and different actors coming together, both in sort of planned events, moments like this where you hear people on stage and maybe that inspires you to do something. It reminds you that you are not alone, because it can feel like a very lonely business, and then you look around like, God, look at all these great people doing great things. That can be good. And then you have those kind of meetings and those kind of happenstance things where you would never normally have met, but you bump into each other and maybe something new happens as a result.
Yeah.
So it functions in all those different ways. And then in the US at the moment, obviously we've seen the growth of London. That's great. Big tailwinds, reason for us all to gather here. It's been quite therapeutic, I think, for the Americans.
Sure.
It's been lack of economic side. But in the US, we feel it's really important to hold that space open and kind of keep protecting that space over the next few years. I hope it's not too many, but that's forming a quite important
2 more
function.
years.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And it's nice to see all these regional gatherings really building that momentum, in some ways stronger than the COPs do. Hongpeng, let me turn to you. At COP30 last year, UNEP launched the Food Waste Breakthrough. Can you talk about that and how it connects to larger climate change goals?
Thank you. Firstly, let me thank Food Bank and Google Cloud to have me here to join this lovely event. I have to say, you have a beautiful office. And I was in Bloomberg this morning. I think both of you have a very beautiful office. So Nick, we should ask our colleagues to learn from here. Yeah, I really want to echo what Nick and Helen said. I feel really excited. I used to live in London over 10 years. I moved to Paris last year. And recently, so many of you can feel like there are a lot of frustration. Okay, and we don't know where to go. This week here, we see a lot of positivity. We see a lot of energy, community. We know many other people think the same way like us, and we want to work together. Well, the overall context is not easy, the funding is not stable, but you see a group of people want to take actions. We care the planet, we care ourselves. We care, more important, our next generation. So back to food. We launched the Food Waste Breakthrough last year with climate champions, with food champion country, Brazil, UK, and Japan, which is really to work together to address this, I think roughly 8 to 10% of the methane emission from the food sector. The breakthrough really focuses on 3 things. The first one, capacity building. So really work with the countries and the cities and the private sector, business world, to provide all the tools, to support how to prevent, food waste. And second one is the data. We need data, to take actions. And of course, the third one is really about the finance and implementation. How to fund the resources to deliver. So obviously, this is a part of climate because the emission from methane, and it's also about transition towards a more sustainable lifestyle, etc. So we are excited to see this is an agenda being followed by the upcoming COP presidency. We look forward to working with many of you to continue this journey. Thank you.
And on that point, Turkey, there's a huge focus on food loss and food waste. Can you talk about that briefly?
Of course. I was in Turkey a couple of weeks ago, I think. There was a massive gathering organized by Turkey government, the Zero Risk Foundation. That's a top priority for this upcoming COP31. The COP31 presidency organized a ministerial. I spent the whole day with many ministers talking about how to prevent, reduce food, food loss. One way, as you can imagine, is also relevant to what we are facing right now. I mean, In one hand, we're so excited to have this week here. On the other hand, this week we see the real extreme heat happening in London, where I'm based in Paris. Throughout the week, 39, 40, 41 degrees, where you can imagine, people you are not familiar with Paris, 99% of the building have no aircon, and people are dying. This is really shocking, moment. So back to food. So cold chain is one way to address the food waste. Again, as our moderator mentioned, that Turkey certainly puts this as one of their top agenda. And again, we look forward to leverage the opportunity to talk about avoid the food loss, about circularity, etc., to really take some concrete actions on the climate.
Great, thank you for that. So Nick, going back to, there's been so much activity at Climate Weeks around the world, and I want you to talk a little bit about sort of those bright spots that are coming out of these Climate Weeks all over the world.
Yeah, so I think the first thing is, nothing, it's no quality like quantity sometimes. And there is just an issue of just the growth. So we doubled last year to 750 events, and I told the team, don't worry, we won't double again. And we doubled again. That's not because we ran out to do events. In fact, we focused on actually trying to combine events and focus on, it's just a spontaneous energy from people. But then Zurich Climate Week started this year, 240 events in its first year. Venice Climate Week, which looks very cool on its website, I must go. Basically, people are saying, well, we want some of that, we want to do it here. So they're just, it's not that we organize all the events. We organize quite a lot of events. But we just give people a platform to do what they need to do. And I checked on the website, 114 of those 1,300 events are about food. And that's probably an underestimate. And actually, half of them are about climate risk. So people are coming in and they're showing what they care about. And those are events like this, but also local events about gardening or national events about food systems. So I think that's my first bright spot, is that when you give people a platform to involve them in change, they come, because there are a lot more people out there that care than journalists think. And I've had to do a lot of explaining on the run into this about the fact that if there's a backlash against climate, it's an elite backlash.
Yeah.
It is not a public backlash by any stretch of the imagination from any polling or any lived experience. So that's my first one. The second one is that we're starting to see pieces come together. So we've been working this year with a lot of the finance-themed climate weeks like Singapore, Dublin, New York, and starting to say, okay, how can we run the conversation across the year on things like transition planning, on how do we change, it sounds boring, prudential reforms on banks, but it means they can lend more money with the same capital. So it's kind of important. Change credit rating agencies, how they score countries when they invest in resilience. Because at the moment, if you invest in resilience, your credit score goes down, despite being better protected, because they only look at its impact on your balance sheet, not its impact on your protection. So rather than having like one event a year, actually running those through the weeks and actually starting to build every year a movement around a few issues to get things done. So it's early days, it's an ecosystem. There's, the grandmother at the moment, not you, Helen, but your
Thanks, Nick.
I'm not going to survive
I've been
that.
working on my skincare.
But yeah, there's a lot of youngsters around. But again, and that's one thing I just come to hear. What we want to do is to work out how to use these platforms now. We've grown them. And one of them is about how do we take exactly some of the energy here. And I'd love to know on zero waste and food. It's actually a good example. What do you want to land at Antalya and then at Ethiopia next year? How can we run those through the things? How do we make this work? Because we haven't got time to kind of limp forward. We need to pick up the pace. And I think the ecosystem of Climate Action Weeks can help us do that. But it's an experiment, so join in and help us do it, because we don't quite know how to make it work, but I'm pretty sure it will work given the energy out there.
You're doing a great job. On the point of bright spots, Helen, what's happening in the private sector that gives you hope as we move forward?
Well, I think that the big shift that we've seen in the last few years, obviously the economic case has really shifted. And so it definitely is easier for companies. A lot of companies have got their business case and they're keeping going. And so I think what we can see is, unlike in other, because, a lot of this is unfortunately kind of, I'd like to say it feels more roller coastery is how it feels. And we're definitely in a kind of down sort of swing at the moment. But unlike in previous times when it was, everyone sort of dropping things, now there's a bit more, that phrase green hushing, it's probably a bit more serious than that, but but companies are still going. The economic case is there are business models. There are a lot of companies for whom this is their core business.
Right.
And we see a lot of them kind of coming to our events and often sponsoring, supporting, because it's part of their business model, and then getting into conversations which are no longer, stand up on stage and say something about your grandchildren. It's much more actually, how do you get a pipeline from A to B without, in the States, a big issue is how do you work with tribal communities and the lands that they're on and work together. And some of those sort of really important, quite nitty-gritty conversations, which are how the transition should happen, they're going on. So that kind of gives you quite a lot of hope, even when the political winds are blowing in different directions.
Yeah, there is some hope there. Because I want to leave this audience with a to-do, an action point. I'd like you all to take maybe 30 seconds to give this audience something you'd like them to take away from this event and do in their own community. So Hong Peng, I'm going to go with you first.
Very practical action. I think I was asking my colleagues, when I was living here, to say why tofu sometimes is more expensive than meat. Okay, while tofu have all of the protein, healthier, etc. I think that's a market. So we need to involve government to set up regulation policy. We need to work with the business sector. We need to work with users and to tell what's the benefit. Then we need to create a market. So in the end, I think for food, for many other sectors, we need to make all the green service products, more affordable, even lower than the traditional one. That's the way really to make the fundamental change. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Nick, a to-do.
A to-do. Andre Delago, the COP president, said on stage at the beginning, sometimes we convene to negotiate, sometimes we convene to build. That's what we're doing here. So I would like you to go away and work out, actually, back to Hong Kong, how can you, in your work, build out efficient cold chains, smart energy use? Give us the space to make the new technologies run. Because at the moment, we've got the technology, but we need more demand for it in that sense. And I think that and if we send that step change, within the next 2 years, global emissions will fall, global oil use will fall, and if we're really lucky, we might even get to global gas use falling by 2030. And then we're in a different space because no one can say nothing's happening. And that, for me, is the positive tipping point we've got to be running for the next few years to kind of start the decline, which is where we need to be.
Fantastic, thank you. Helen, you get the last word.
Yeah, well, I think this very simple one is to keep talking about climate. There's a lot of research that says everyone thinks that they care about the climate, but no one else does. And that's feeding into this notion that Reform and others, just to get political, like very easily kind of say, well, no one cares about this. This is just an expensive agenda. Actually, everyone does care. And so the more you talk about it and actually be clear with one another that you care, we can sort of counter that misinformation that's going around. And I think that's really easy to do and really important.
Thank you. Please give these panelists a round of applause. Thank you for all the work you're doing. Thank you. Thank you.
You got a few minutes?
Keep the round of applause going. They were great. We're now going to turn to the role grocers play in transforming our food and agriculture system. So in this next conversation, we're going to talk about the steps that grocers are taking to nudge us in the right direction as they try to make more sustainable food choices the easy choices. So joining me for the panel, we have Jade Hoy, the executive leader of commercial areas at Whole Foods Market UK. Round of applause. Nice to see you. Danielle Vega is the global senior vice president for health and sustainability at Ahold Delhaize. And Una Hjorniak is the group director for international sustainability at Aldi South Group. Thank you all so much for joining me. And so Danielle and Una, I'd love to start with you both. How is demand for healthy products changing? What opportunity does that create for retailers?
Yeah, I'm happy to go first. I think that firstly, I don't think that retailers are just responding to demand. I've never thought that. I think that we both respond to demand and we create demand. And that puts us in quite an interesting position in the ecosystem, because we have definite influence but perhaps not control. And that means we definitely have responsibility. So we're creating and responding to demand. And I think what I see at the moment in food retail, in various parts of the food system, is a tough time, and so a lot of the questions and the conversations I've been having is around where are the bright spots that you mentioned. And I think one of the bright spots for me in food retail is that the agenda is shifting. So no longer are food retailers delivering programs that are at the side of the business. They're right at the heart of the business, and we're right at the heart of, or in between, households, suppliers, and the rest of the food system. And so what we're seeing is when we're talking about healthier choices, we're talking about growth now. We're talking about growth and opportunity. When we're talking about efficient supply chains, we're talking about cutting food waste and managing plastics and packaging better. And then we're talking about efficient operations and cost savings, and looking at supply chain resiliency as building business resiliency, so sourcing intelligence as business resiliency. So that whole conversation, not just the language, but also the positioning of the initiatives, has moved from sustainability topics to value creation. I think that's a big shift that we all have to do or die.
Exactly. Una?
Yeah, I think maybe just to add to that, I think it's bringing a lot of opportunity for us now for different kinds of conversations. So I think I emphasize too what you said, it's not healthy just in terms of how the business is operating, but really thinking about healthy supply chains. And with that comes a lot of unique and different kinds of conversations we're having with our suppliers too. So they're coming to us, I think, with more creative ideas, product innovation opportunities, and really thinking also about how we could talk to the customer differently in ways. So I think we're trying to figure out now how do we catalyze on some of that to really keep the momentum going and start to bring it mainstream with the opportunity that we can.
On that point of talking to consumers differently, and this is maybe a question for you all, how do you use the health lens to tie into sustainability? Because for a lot of us, that's not an easy connection. Whoever wants to go first.
We're using it in the most simple way possible, which is a commercial growth opportunity. So health, we've seen fads and dietary shifts before. We're now seeing an innovation curve, and we're here on the S-curve. And so if food retailers don't respond to these shifts, then we lose out commercially. So health is now a growth opportunity, and we've got the business case to back that up, I think, for the first time. And the speed of the shift is driven by GLP-1 use and the shift of diets, but also more awareness, I think, of ultra-processed foods, also shifting the basket. So our job is to get in front of that S-curve a little bit.
I think what we're seeing too is a lot more enthusiasm too. I mean, I know we've got a WWF sponsor and partner in the room. I mean, thinking about the plant-based diets and the opportunities that also has. So not only just planetary health opportunities, but then again for people. And so for us, I mean, I think when I look at our fruit and veg business, I mean, that's where we see huge potential and also engagement with consumers. And we're starting to think about what are the different kind of creative ways also to plug into that conversation. How do you think about, recipes and the ways that you can cook for healthier options? And we see a lot of potential coming through in that way as well.
I think consumers are very curious, and so as much as we can provide information and stories and backgrounds for them, they want to know the provenance of the product. They want to know what the ingredients are, how they're sourced, how it was grown, and how it got to that shelf. And in working a lot with brands and challenger brands specifically, there's a lot of awareness around every single detail, not just what the product is and that it tastes good, but is the packaging sustainable? Is this a biodiverse product? Is this something that the consumer today really wants to buy and be proud to show off on their shelf at home or to serve to their family and their friends?
On that point, storytelling is such a key part, especially of what Whole Foods, but all retailers are trying to do right now. But it's not always easy to do. You have to do it in a simplistic way in a lot of ways, and also sort of a complex way in a lot of ways, so that consumers can understand it, that they don't feel like they're being greenwashed, and that they understand the true origin of that product. Can you talk a little bit more about how Whole Foods does that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think authenticity is really at the heart of it, and we're so proud to work with the brands and the products that we have. For us, it's how do we showcase everybody? So with the limited range that we have, we want to really pick out those unique stories that we think will resonate with people. And in this day and age, we all know the power of social media. We all know the way that our consumers interact with our Instagram profiles or even now our TikTok profiles. They're such a great agent to be able to reach people outside the four walls of the stores and then hopefully draw them into the stores and to the products on the shelf. And then within store, it's all about that activation and that in-store experience. And that gives you that differentiation to be able to really storytell and to connect. One of my favorite ways and the most effective ways is also when the founders come in and talk directly to the customers. There's nothing like getting a firsthand feedback, but B, being able to make that really human-to-human connection.
That's great. That's great. The story is so important, and the sustainability initiatives that you're all implementing and the health initiatives you're all implementing are so important. But right now, I mean, there's no denying that consumers are facing huge affordability challenges, no matter what the president of the United States says, that affordability is not a word. Affordability is a word, and when consumers are squeezed so financially, how can you all balance the need for affordability and sustainability?
Yeah, I mean, affordability is key for both of us. I mean, for the discounters, also for the mainstream food retailers. You have to get it in the right order, otherwise you can't sell either health or sustainability. So no matter what our markets, our customer research shows across North America, across Europe and Indonesia, affordability is key. And so price has to be the first thing on the agenda. But also customers care about sustainability and health. Health first and then sustainability. So you have to get it in the right order and make it affordable. And I think what we share is those common levers that we can pull as all food retailers can and have been doing for many years. Around pricing, around placement, around promos. It's that food environment that we can create. Plus affordability at the center of it that really helps us make healthier and affordable options easier. I think also I would add another thing, which is the alignment between retailers around how we measure healthy sales and the targets that we set can help us make sure that we have that food environment, which is an accessible food environment. So when customers come in, if they know that a food retailer has a target around percentage of healthy sales, then they know that their basket is going to be healthier. If a food retailer has a protein transition target, then they know that they're going to be guided in ways that are pushing them maybe towards animal versus plant versus animal-based proteins.
Yeah. I think maybe just to complement that, and I really like the last panel also spoke about this too, is where the conversation has also shifted now. So I mean, the impacts, like we mentioned, are really here today. I mean, just last week, we see kind of commodity briefings that show us that the price of tomatoes are going up 40% because of water shortages. I mean, it is here today. So for us, I mean, really getting affordability and sustainability is interconnected because we have to really think about the long-term resiliency of supply chains now. So the conversations that we have with our commercial colleagues are very much now less so us over there, wanting to do really nice initiatives. It's really integrated now into how do we help solve the price component and what do our initiatives and the support that we want to emphasize on regenerative agriculture and the opportunities I think that we see working across the value chain are really going to help unlock that. And similarly speaking, I think of how do we continue the affordability push is also where we can advocate for change too. So I think that's another, I think maybe I would say especially have maybe been more quiet in the past, but trying to figure out how we can lend our voice more into the future as well, around where are the greater incentives for the type of work that can actually support farmers and suppliers along the journey, which is of course supported by all of us up here, but also looking at what the support that governments can offer as we continue to really try to balance all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Jay, do you want to comment on affordability, which is Whole Foods, as much as I love it, is not known for?
Yeah, sorry. We do try. It is, but complex problems require creative solutions, and in the background, we've got a team that's constantly looking at, like, are there different ways where we can backhaul products? Can we work with transport to drive some efficiencies? Can we work with other partners or third-party producers to use the same ingredients and the same supply chains to be able to bring down the costs through scale and efficiency? So I think at the heart of it, what we believe in is, like, we want to sell the highest quality natural and organic products, and that's always going to be our priority. We're going to strive to put it at the lowest price possible, but we recognize that we're not going to be selling 20p vegetables or anything like that. We have a mission that we want to fulfill.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we've talked about the challenges that consumers are facing. You're all facing razor thin margins right now, and I want to talk about what if all of you, and I think the three people on this panel do this, but I'm not sure if other grocers do. What if what if grocers were able to see sustainability as something that shouldn't be, competitive, that you're all working together towards? And I feel like you are, but what's your advice to other retailers who really, want to work together but find it very difficult?
I think the case that we many times also try to make, especially with wearing my discounter hat on, is, the working together and collective action in general, those types of solutions, they are allowing us to pool funds, pool technical resources, capabilities, and capacity. Knowledge is really actually then brought together, and it's the more cost-efficient way to do it at the end of the day. All of us going off and doing things in silos just to go out there and be able to say we're the first to do blah, blah, blah initiative, it really doesn't drive the kind of impact that any of us are looking for. So I think collective action is 100% the key to the way that we do it. And at the end of the day, the risks are shared. So what we're experiencing with tomatoes in Spain, everyone else is experiencing too. So let's get on with it and do it together and see the financial benefit you get as well from doing that.
Right, absolutely. Daniela?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think we need to realize that our success is a shared success. Yes. That's really, really key, and something that I've been reminded of this Climate Week, actually, that unless we're building initiatives and programs that are good for customers, that are good for farmers, that are good for our suppliers and retailers, then we're not gonna get the scale that we're also desperately seeking at the moment. So I do think we can do more. I do think we can align on data, on metrics, but to your point, Una, on the market signals, so that we can focus more in creating that demand as well as responding to the demand at the same time.
Thank you so much, Jade.
Yeah, agreed with that too. And it's nice to have events like this where we can come together and collaborate and share. And then I think if we continue to do that, we're all working towards the same long-term goals. So everyone benefits.
Thank you. So we have about a minute left. And just as in the last panel, I'll do this all day. What's it to do for this audience to take away?
I would say if you could make one commitment that you're going to start doing today, or that's a change today, that one commitment that every one person makes in this room can actually have quite a monumental impact.
That's perfect. Thank you. Daniela?
I would say I went to an event earlier on in the week. It had groups of corporates, so retailers and manufacturers, farmers, insurance companies, and banks. We had a great session, and then at the end of the session, I was talking to one of the farmers, and he said, I haven't understood a single word from the insurance companies, and so it just makes me think if you're planning an initiative or producing a product or designing a message, just make sure that it's designed in a way that everybody in the chain understands what you're talking about.
Love it, love it. You get the last word.
Ooh, last one. I would just say let's just be open. Let's try to think outside of the barriers and break down the silos those. So maybe we don't come to mind for you at first of grocery retail, or do they really want to participate in the process? But I think hopefully we are showing that we are very interested, we are hungry for it as well. So please do come to us and look forward to partnering where we can.
Fantastic. What a great way to end. Please give them a round of applause. Thank you all so much. Thank you. As I mentioned earlier, I've had the chance to meet with farmers all over the world, and I'm truly honored to have been able to do that. It's a true privilege, and I'm continually inspired by their resourcefulness, their creativity, their resilience, their knowledge. Unless we work hand in hand with farmers, there can be no transformation of our food and agriculture systems. And that's why it's so important for Food Tank, and it's always been over the last 13 years, to center their voices at our summits and at our events. And during the International Year of the Women Farmer, give that a round of applause, everyone. We're making sure that the women who nourish our communities and the world are receiving the attention, credit, and ultimately the investment that they deserve. We're turning the stage over right now to 3 amazing women farmers from Ireland, a country that offers us many case studies in a sustainable food future. And these women are here to share their stories with us. While they're speaking, I hope you'll keep an eye on the screen. Haven Worley, who directed Food Tank's first short documentary, Irish Farmers: A Love Story, recently visited each of their farms and captured footage that really brings us into their farm, and it's really beautiful. There's a QR code in your program, and you can watch the full film later. It's beautiful, and we're really proud of it. And we just had a sold-out screening in Dublin and are excited to bring it to festivals throughout the year. So please join me in welcoming our first farmer, Elva Gerard of Brookfield Farm in County Tipperary. She's extraordinary. Please give her a round of applause.
Gosh, it's a little bit bright in here. I'm here to tell you a story. And it starts with swallows. We all know swallows, don't we? That little shriek, they stitch the air. They're diving and swooping above my farmyard. They come in spring, so they bring the hope of the changing season. They leave in autumn. They have such a hard life. They're little tiny things that fly and fly over the sea all the whole way down to South Africa for the winter and the whole way back up to Ireland for the summer, back to the nest in that little shed in my farmyard. And a couple of weeks ago, I saw 4 little swallow chicks, their little heads peeking over the nest, watching me watching them. It's a song title, isn't it? And then one morning they were gone. They'd fledged. I saw them swooping through the air, thrilled with themselves, screaming and shouting and just full of this joy. And I was so happy. And I look at the swallows and it just fills me with their resilience, my resilience. And a few days later, another little nest in another shed. Again, 4 little swallow chicks peeking over the edge, watching me, the parents swooping in, crying in alarm when I got in their way. And then the next morning I went out and the nest had been broken down. And I think it was a feral cat or a pine marten, and all that was left of those little swallow chicks was crumpled wings on the floor. And I was so sad, because life is tough. Life is tough for swallows. Life is very hard. They need clean water. They need earth to make mud. They need sheltered spaces. They need to get away from predators. They need lots and lots of insects. And that's what my farm can help provide for them, because I'm organically certified. We have lots of insects. We have clean water. I spend a lot of time looking to make sure that there's no runoffs from extra nutrients running off into our beautiful lake in Loch Derg. And talking about swallows, it brings me to another story. 23 years ago, this year, my father told a beautiful story about swallows. It was at my brother's funeral, and he died when he was 23. So it's a kind of a bookend. And he told the story that we're like swallows, us humans. We fly from the outer darkness. Who knows where we come from? Any of us, our little spirits. We fly through. Remember, let's be more swallow, and let's be less predatory cat. And that kind of links back to my farming, what I do on the farm. What I try to do is bring people together, build community. I'm a primary producer. I'm very, very proud of growing arable crops, grain, legumes. I have sheep, bees, and all together they work. It's a very complicated, diverse farm. And because it's so complicated, it's really made me appreciate the huge value of diversity and the huge value of people who support the kind of farming that we're doing. Bringing together that awareness that diversity and the complications, that cycle of life and birth and death that the swallows exemplify, it's largely what we should be doing more of. And we should be putting down plates in front of our friends, and it should be less about how much we can kind of grasp, but more about how much we can share. And over my years farming, I thought I was changing the farm. I converted it from conventional farm to organic, and I thought I was changing it. But in fact, the farm changed me. And I think our little bright hole is all the better for it. Thank you.
Alva is incredible. We're so lucky to know her. I'd now like to welcome Sophie Bell, a third-generation farmer from County Cavan in Ireland. Please give her a round of applause as she makes her way to the stage.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sophie Bell, and I'm a young farmer from County Cavan. And at the age of 18, I had to take on the farm because my dad had to emigrate for work. That's in my final year in school. It's a 56-acre farm and something that is currently unviable to use full-time as an income. My story did not begin with me. It began with the women before me. They were hard-working women. Their work often went unrecognized, and they took care of us and brought our family through really difficult times. And yeah, their work went unrecognized most of the time. The first memory I have of my Nana is in her sitting room round a cozy fire. She'd have her whole family and neighbours round, and time was given freely, and there was an understanding that we were brought up in life together. My Nana emigrated when she was 18 to pursue a life for herself and a career. She was really independent, courageous, and a woman ahead of her time. And I think that is in me, and I see her in me and my mum as well. And I think I've brought her along with me in this journey. However, at the same time, me and my Nana are very different. At the age of 26, She had to have a family, she had to get married, and she did not have that choice. Whereas for me, I have that choice in today's society. And I was able to pursue my education, gain a master's degree, and also pursue my career and take ownership of the farm. And although we're very different, some things have not changed in society. I still have to face double standards, more expectations, and prove myself a lot. From that, I have been advocating for these issues. I've accumulated a large following online, on Instagram and TikTok. And I've been telling my story, and that has accumulated 150,000 people with a reach of 10 million, and it's mainly females. And I'm helping to empower the next generation ahead of me, as well as telling the story of farming. I've also had the opportunity to speak on behalf of young farmers in Brussels, the EU, and various places across Europe. I've been able to use my voice, and I've been able to speak on behalf of the women before me who did not have that voice. And I think, looking ahead, my farm, I see fields, but I also see possibility. I want to develop the farm into a place where people can come, they can immerse themselves in nature, and they can also see how the food is produced. They can come and stay as a retreat. And I also want to develop a brand where it's fully traceable, and I can determine the price, and I can sustain a full-time living on that farm. I currently work full-time because that is not currently possible. And I often think, imagine what I could achieve if I wasn't pursuing my dreams at night or at the weekends. And I think that is the reality for so many farmers in Ireland at the moment. So imagine what could be achieved if we had that support, that financial backing, and a company who believes in us and wants that to pursue that together. Along this journey, I want to develop a whole brand that really shows that other farmers can achieve this from a small amount of land. And I want to set a whole new standard and show a new outlook on farming and help others into the industry. And I want to bring people along with me to show that. Along this whole journey, I want to bring the women before me who did not have the opportunity to pursue their dreams, to pursue their passion, who had to set their dreams aside in order to look after their families. Thank you so much.
Love Sophie Bell. She did great. So our final storyteller is Karina Rosengrave of Kinisla dairy farmer at Burnview Farm in County Clare, Ireland. She is also Ireland's national ambassador for the International Year of the Woman Farmer. Give her a round of applause, please.
Hi, my name is Karina Rosengrave and I'm a full-time farmer. I farm alongside my brother Jerry in the foothills of the Burren in Crusheen in County Clare. We're a mixed enterprise of dairy, beef and free-range eggs. Our farm has diversified over the years to keep our family farm alive, sustainable and to provide an income for our family. My love story started on the top of Laharden Hill. I see it clearly now, the white walls of the hospital room. My dad sitting beside me, the sun shining in the window. We were looking out on Croke Park, a famous GA field in Ireland, and he told me, "You will play there someday." To me, it was just a memory, a dream. But he was right. I went out, I played for Clare, I won an All-Ireland on that famous field. But that wasn't the conversation that stuck with me on that day. At the time, I didn't quite realise the message he was telling me, but now I do. He turned to me and he said, "I have reclaimed Laharden Hill, but I don't get the opportunity to cut the first cut of silage." He purchased the hill. It was rough land. It needed care. It needed love. And that is the labour of love in which he poured into that field. He poured his soul, his heart. We were there beside him, helping where we could as kids, picking the stones. We watched him reclaim that land. Laharden Hill sits in the centre of our farm. Without him purchasing the land, Burnview Farm wouldn't be where it is today. From that hill, we overlook the burn. I have the most beautiful office view while I walk my cows in to get milked. I get to appreciate the nature. I get to appreciate the love that my dad put into reclaiming that field. We heard the stories of the first cut. Mam rang Dad saying we got the silage in. The neighbours in the parish rode in behind my mam, my brothers and sisters, while they got the silage done. The tractors hummed, the birds sang, and all my dad was worried about was, did you make them tea? Everybody had the tea and the ham sandwiches, but I could see the sadness in his eyes. He didn't get to finish what he started. And he never did. So it's up to myself and my brother now to continue on his legacy, his story. And that is what we do. We care for the land as much as any other farmer, and I believe that every farmer cares for the land. There is no other career in the world that a farmer gets up at 5 o'clock in the morning and there isn't a cut-off point. You work until your animals are all cared for, until the silage is drawn back in home. You put in hours and hours to provide food for the world. And for me, we need to bring back the connection between the farmer, the food, and the nature. Laharden Hill has really become the centre of our farm. So much so that during the summer holidays, I asked my 2 young girls, where do you want to go on holidays? And they turn and say, Mammy, I want to go camping on Laharden Hill. Which I would like France or Spain or somewhere exotic. But the children win each time. And for me, it really depicts what farming is about and the story that my dad started. It's a true love story of nature. My kids get to see the sunrise. They get to see the sunset. They get to sleep under the stars that my dad once worked under. They're making their memories. They go down, they rob the milk out of the bull tank, and they bring it back up the hill to make a cup of tea. Our love story is made on Laharden Hill, and it is the centre of what we do. And it is the chapter that my dad left, but it isn't the end of the story. We diversified into dairy going back 9 years ago in order to sustain our family farm and make it viable. I work alongside Kinisla, who I supply the milk to. Kinisla have a really good regen programme, which is called the Evolve programme, where I work alongside Kinisla with the Evolve programme for sustainability. We as Irish dairy farmers, through that programme, look after the health of our animals. We look after grass management. We're looking at the fertility of our soil, and we're looking at the healthcare of our calves that come to that ground to make sure that there's a future in dairy farming. And for me, the message I would like everyone here to do and to realise is the work that every single farmer puts in. It's not about the money. It's about the love, the care, to provide food nationwide for everyone. And if one thing you are all to take from today, shop local, support your local farmer. Thank you.
Thank you, Karina. Keep the applause going for all three of those farmers, please. And the International Year of the Woman Farmer. Extraordinary. Food Tank has been so lucky to work with those farmers, and their stories will continue, and we'll continue to document them. In our next conversation, we're going to take Ireland as a case study and talk about the lessons we can learn from policymakers and business leaders to support sustainable food and agriculture systems on land and in the water. So before we start, we have video remarks from Minister Timmy Dooley, who serves as Ireland's Minister of State at the Department of Agriculture, Food, Fisheries and the Marine, and at the Department of Climate, Energy and the Environment. So please play the video.
I'm Timmy Dooley, the Irish Minister for Fisheries and the Marine. And before I begin, I'd like to extend my sincere thanks to Food Tank, Google, London Climate Action Week, the UN Environment Programme for bringing today's events together, alongside PAI, Landscape Alliance, Kinisla, Tapestry Foundation, the Alliance of Biodiversity International, and COICH, WWF, and Strong Roots. Now that's a lot of people to be involved, so well done. Bringing together leaders from across agriculture, business, finance, government, and civil society is essential as we work towards a more sustainable food system. We're also proud that one of Food Tank's co-founders, Bernard Pollock, now calls Ireland home. Bernie and the Food Tank team have become wonderful champions for Irish agriculture and indeed Irish farmers, helping share their stories with audiences, not just here in Ireland, but around the world. I was very much looking forward to joining you in person at London's Climate Action Week and hearing directly from Alva, Karina and Sophie. But unfortunately, government business has kept me in Ireland today. But I know they have represented Irish agriculture with passion, honesty and pride that define farming communities across our country. The stories you've heard today remind us that agriculture is ultimately about people. Behind every farm, every product, and every innovation are individuals and families deeply connected to the land, their animals, their waters, and indeed their communities. I'm especially proud that Food Tank chose to spotlight Irish farmers through its documentary short film featuring these three amazing women. Their experiences demonstrate that sustainability, innovation, and strong rural communities can go hand in hand. Ireland's committed to supporting farmers and fishermen and women as they respond to the challenges of climate change while continuing to produce really high quality food. Whether we're talking about sustainable land management, protecting biodiversity, strengthening our blue economy, or investing in new technologies, our goal is to help producers remain resilient for the generations to come. We also recognise that governments can't do this work alone. Progress depends on strong partnership between farmers, fishermen and women, businesses, researchers, innovators, and of course policymakers. I was particularly looking forward to joining Richard Chute from Kinisla and Emma Curtis from Strong Roots. Both companies are excellent examples of Irish business, leading with purpose and demonstrating how sustainability can be embedded into business strategy while supporting producers and indeed their communities. Ireland's food and agriculture sector has much to contribute to global conversations about climate action, food security, and indeed rural development. But we also know we have much to learn from others. Events like this help create the collaboration and exchange of ideas that will be essential in the years ahead. So thank you again to Food Tank and to all of today's partners, and thank you to everybody participating too. These are really important discussions. I wish you a productive event and look forward to continuing this work together. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I love what Minister Dooley had to say about passion, honesty, pride, resiliency. Those are something that farmers all over the world really, have in their being. So it's so wonderful to hear that. I'd like to introduce now Richard Chute, who is the Chief Financial Officer at Kinisla, formerly known as Kerry Dairy Ireland. Please give him a round of applause.
Thank you.
I'm going to sit over here. I don't know why you're sitting so far away from me.
Sorry,
I wore deodorant. And Emma Curtis is the Managing Director at Strong Roots. Please give her a round of applause. I'm so pleased to have you both here. Thank you for your partnership. This has been an extraordinary collaboration, so thank both of you. Richard, let me start with you. Kinisla works so closely with farmers like Karina, who we heard from before. Why is supporting farmers such a huge priority for the company?
Thanks, Daniela. Supporting farmers for Kinisla is really one of our highest priorities in business. Because what it does is it leads to a win-win. A win for the farmer and longevity of their business, and it leads to a win for the business so that we have a competitive advantage over other processors where our milk from our milk suppliers is categorized as highly sustainable milk through the practice of our Evolve Regen program. So in that program, we incentivize our farmers to conduct certain practices across a host of different areas, whether that's soil, animal health, grass, and the like. Karina mentioned it. And from that, what we're doing is we're investing in their business and incentivizing them to ensure that their business is there to be able to hand the baton over to the next generation.
Yeah, those incentives really have to be there for farmers to continue those practices. Yeah. Emma, I want to turn to you because the Irishness of Strong Roots really resonates with me as an American. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about that and why it's so important to the company for that culture and those ideals to come through.
Of course. So for anyone that doesn't know, Strong Roots is a frozen brand that was born in Ireland in 2015. And our sole purpose is to get more vegetables onto more plates. The Irishness comes from the fact that that's where we're born. That's where our headquarters are. It's where all of our ideas come from. But I guess what's most important for us is kind of the secret sauce of Strong Roots. So we've never kind of been the biggest team in the room, but we've always had a very strong presence. And that's because from being Irish, I think you have, and I have obviously a very English accent here, but I grew up in Ireland for the last 20 years. There's this incredible authenticity, and I think Jade spoke about authenticity earlier. There's an authenticity, there is a bold and braveness that constantly drives for better when it comes to simple, real food. And I think what Strong Roots has done really well is, while we're not farmers, that's not who we are. We talked earlier about farmers also need, and producers also need, brands to tell the story and to break down complexity. And what Strong Roots does really well is it talks to the masses on a level that's quite exciting and pretty cool, we think, that takes people on the journey of why these issues are important.
Thank you for that. Richard, let me come back to you. We're here in London this week because of Climate Week. The extreme temperatures all across Europe are really devastating. Can you talk about the impacts on Kinisla farmers right now from the climate crisis?
Sure. So it's a little bit cooler in Ireland at the moment, but it's still pretty warm over there. From a climate perspective, it has a significant impact on grass growth, on the management of the farm itself. For instance, this spring was extremely wet. And what happens in that scenario is that the milking herd are kept indoors longer, which slows down the amount of milk volume that we would receive. So climate does have a material impact on the production of milk from that perspective. And then, you could get a dry spell and grass will grow significantly faster. Mm-hmm. So the milk supplier has to manage that in their business to be able to cut silage and graze fields in probably a shorter period of time than they would prefer.
And it's becoming a longer-term strategy, a longer-term climate strategy for the company, right, to help these farmers innovate.
Absolutely. So our Evolve Regen program is the only global dairy business who has received level 5 SDP certification. We can prove as a global dairy business that it is possible to have a profitable business and at the same time pay a very strong competitive price for the raw milk that we receive, and as well to pay our milk suppliers to practice sustainable practices in their businesses.
Again, the incentives have to be there, yeah.
For sure.
Emma, coming back to you, when we talk about healthy food or climate-friendly food, there's been this sort of overemphasis from my perspective on fresh. I love fresh food, by the way. But, I think in some ways when we look at what, the future holds and what, people can afford and what's accessible and what's good for the climate, frozen food has to be the new fresh. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, of course. And I think it's obviously something we feel incredibly passionately about. And interestingly, it hasn't come up yet. So Hong Pong Lei, I think who's still over there, was talking about the wastage problem. Frozen is one of the best solutions to the frozen problem. And then when we were talking from the grocers, the frozen area is still that area where no one wants to go. It's a bit cold and it's not that cool. And I think what we have to do is it's cool, but terminology. But it's not that fun. And I think there's a real opportunity for us all to kind of make that frozen area that bit more interesting. And that's what Strong Roots is all about. So we are vegetable based and we are frozen because we think they are things that can really help the planet. And as a business, we're not about taking anything off the plate. We're for everything. But we do think if you could put more frozen vegetables on the plate, it really can help. So frozen is in our DNA. It's who we are. We feel very proud to be frozen. And I think if you go even deeper into some of the issues we have and you look at food banks and areas that just don't get access to fresh in any way because of the wastage, frozen's the solution. Like, let's get freezers into food banks. Let's try and get freezers into more places. And then you get access to, in essence, fresh and in some instances more nutritious because they have everything they need right at the source. So we think it's pretty cool and the answer to many things.
Absolutely, and I hope refrigerator and cooling companies are listening. Give those resources to
genuinely,
food banks.
that would solve a lot.
You mentioned making frozen food more interesting. Talk a little bit about how you can make that more interesting for consumers who sometimes, are reluctant to buy frozen.
Yeah. So I think there's two parts, and we as a business started 10 years ago, and the aim was to create really innovative, clean, vegetable-based products. And we do as little as possible to the vegetables, and then through that whole process, we champion taste. So I think I heard earlier that on consumers' minds at the moment, it is health and then sustainability. It's actually taste first. So if something's not tasty, you're not going to get people to buy it. So what Strong Roots pride themselves on is we want to be the tastiest thing in your freezer, which then means you have a vegetable, which then means you're also helping from a sustainable point of view. So from our point of view, we are creating really cool products. So cauliflower hash browns, we'd be known for broccoli bites, kale and quinoa burger, my favorite, which is the sweet potato fries, which we created about 15 years ago. They're all products that people like to have and feel quite proud of. So for us, making things that bit more interesting, a little bit more exciting, but keeping taste at the pinnacle is everything that we strive to do.
Deliciousness has to be at the core of everything. Otherwise, all of it's for naught. Yeah. Richard, we heard from Minister Dooley a little bit about the importance of blue food systems. That's something that's very important to his work. Can you talk about how Kinisla is supporting some interesting work around watersheds?
Yeah, for sure. So one of our incentive programs in our Evolve Regen program is around water, ensuring and incentivizing our farmers to capture water, to reuse that water, and as well to create, I suppose, a little farm lake, which increases the biodiversity on each of the farms. And would allow for certain rainwater overflow to fall into. So that's just one of the programs out of our Evolve Regen program.
Yeah, and it just shows how terrestrial agriculture affects water in so many different ways. Those are interlinked. You can't break them apart.
Not at all, and it'll have an impact on all of the other programs that we have as well, which is around the livelihood of farmers, so that they're less stressed about certain issues, whether it's around grass growth, because all of our 2,600 milk suppliers are completely grass-fed.
Absolutely.
So it's really important.
Thank you. Emma, I want to shift gears a little bit because, I've talked to companies all over the world. I interact with them on a weekly basis. Sometimes acquisitions go really well and sometimes they go really bad. And so I'm wondering, Strong Roots recently went through this kind of acquisition. What did you learn from it? What's working and maybe what's not?
Yeah, of course. So a couple of years ago, McCain acquired Strong Roots. And McCain, when we talk about regen and we talk about incentives, their full tail to farmers all the way up to products is phenomenal. So perfect marriage. What I would say when a challenger brand is acquired is there is a definite moment of you lose your confidence as a brand. You lose your confidence. You think the bigger business way is the way to do things. And what I would say we've learned very quickly is you need to be brave, you need to protect the space in your business for problem solvers, and you need to think that there is a better way. So what we've done in Strong Roots, and kind of we've gained our confidence actually in the last 2 years, is we have continued to problem solve in the way we did previously, but we're now putting a huge emphasis on if Strong Roots can problem solve things, for example, our batter that we use on our chips, we now have moved to a completely clean batter. It's removed xanthan gum, we put cassava fiber in there, which is incredible for gut health, etc. We've problem solved that for Strong Roots, but then you implant that into a 16 billion chip business, that becomes game changing. So what we've done in the last 2 years is we've changed the narrative in our own heads. So that's the first learning, be brave. And then we've now started to see ourselves as kind of the thought leaders for a brand that can genuinely change things at the scale that McCain are. So I think what I would say is you go through a journey of acquisition of trying to find out who you are, remember who you were the day before you were bought. And that's how you remain.
And that takes that bravery, that courage you mentioned. And how does that get instilled in business leaders who have, maybe not always thought of it that way?
I think the team. So I think Strong Roots, we're not a huge team. We've got an office in New York and Dublin and Shoreditch, so we are global, but it's not a big team. And anybody that walks through the door, we have a few little hurdles that you have to cross. And really caring, I'm not going to say what we actually say because it's got swear words in it, but really, really caring is the first filter. So if you don't genuinely care and you don't see a way to make things better, you're not even in the gang.
Yeah.
So I think the real answer to that is each other. And when it becomes really hard, the easiest thing to do is go for speed or go for profit. And by being a B Corp as we are, that's not the only agenda for us. And McCain have signed up to that as a business. We're about people, profit, and planet, and that allows you to stay in your lane, and that's the right place.
Yeah, absolutely. Richard, I was talking to your colleague David last week about the renaming of Kerry Dairy Ireland and to Kinisla. That takes bravery and courage as well in terms of the marketing, the campaigning, the storytelling that you have to tell to consumers. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. The Kinisla was originally part of Kerry Group, which is a global taste and nutrition company, and we consolidated the dairy business of Kerry Group, and it was formed as Kerry Dairy Ireland, and then we rebranded that after the business was purchased by the milk suppliers. So the name itself, Kinisla, it has meaning, Ken being the Ken folk, our milk suppliers, their families, our employees, representing all of the people in our catchment area, and Isla for the island of Ireland, and most particularly for the southwest of Ireland where we're based. So it is a large project in itself. We had the Taoiseach, the Prime Minister of Ireland, launch our new name down in Listowel in County Kerry about a month ago. And over the next number of months, we'll progress to change certain legal names and branding and the like. So it's just part of our business evolution, and it'll go hand in glove with our sustainability program.
That's great. That's great. Emma, you talked about food loss and food waste before. I want to give you a chance to talk about this program, Support Plus Feed, because it's really innovative and important.
That's really important to us. So part of our B Corp status and why we've managed to get the certification is around our volunteering program and our donations to food banks. And this actually started back in 2013 when we started the first ever food bank with just vegetables, which was not about bringing anything out there, but it was about highlighting the inaccess that people that can't afford vegetables, they don't get them at food banks. It's dry goods. So we had this lovely idea back in 2013, but as anything, you need lots of funding to keep going with it. And we've actually picked it back up in the last couple of years, but in partnership with Support Plus Feed. So for anybody that doesn't know Support Plus Feed, they are a global organization. They have very similar principles to us. So they're for health, for everyone, and for planet. And what they do is they bring together the suppliers that can offer food with the people that need it. So they are a global logistics company that allow us to bring the food to the people that need it. But they also have a really great cultural relevance in that Billie Eilish's mum is the founder. We were lucky enough to go to one of their events in LA a couple of weeks ago, which was a pickleball game. It's coming to the UK very soon, by the way, if anyone's into pickleball. We had Angelina Jolie, we had Kristen Bell, we had some incredible celebrities that were all there as part of this event. So for Strong Roots, we get the opportunity to donate, we get the opportunity to talk to consumers, we also get the opportunity to speak to celebrities that can highlight the issues that are happening, and Support Plus Feed are now our global partners in allowing us to do this in all the markets we work in.
Yeah, that kind of, you can't buy that kind of advertising, right? You know, to have celebrities endorse something.
And celebrities that care.
They exactly, genuinely care. Yeah. Sort of on that point, you know, you both have to figure out ways to work with policymakers, and I'm wondering, what are some of the ways that you think policymakers can better support your business? And maybe I'll turn to you first.
Of course. So I think it goes on both sides. So how can the brands help the policymakers? And this is from a brand point of view, an FMCG company. And how can the policymakers help us? I think the brand's job in many ways is they're at the face of the issues. So they understand what problems need to be solved because they're in it day in, day out. I think brands being more vocal and clear on what they are. And then from a policymaker point of view, I think there needs to be more forums where there is genuine gathering of many people across the industry that come together and work as a collective. So we talked earlier about how do you not go in your single races. I think we're really bad at that. I think everyone's head down. If we win, then that's great. If we all win, then that's great. So forums like this, which is an unbelievable day, but I think targeted to frozen food. We should have a frozen food conversation. We should have a fresh food conversation. But we definitely need more forums to allow thought leaders to come together. And I don't think there's many opportunities for that at the moment.
Yeah, that silo breaking is essential.
Completely.
Richard?
I think the Irish government is really good at supporting Irish farmers, particularly from a capital investment perspective. They give significant grants to particular areas, and they are things that they update and they change. Probably one thing perhaps they could look at is how best can they support the next generation of farmers, the next generation of people who may not be farmers but who want to join the farming community. You know, how can they incentivize them, whether it's through tax or whatever other policies or measures that they have, to ensure that we have a strong population to carry on, you know, the baton for the next generation in across our dairy and at large the agricultural sector.
Perfect call to action to end on. Thank you both so much. This has been a great panel. Please give them a round of applause. In this next conversation, we're going to dive into the policies and practices that can make our supply chains more traceable and transparent, and why that matters for building trust and advancing sustainability. So joining us, we have Fernando Valeze, the Senior Director of Beef and Leather Supply Chains at WWF. Give him a round of applause. Blake Harris, the Managing Director of the Global Food Traceability Center at the Institute of Food Technologists. Blade Brink, the Product Operations Manager for Whole Chain. Round of applause. And please join me in welcoming back Sophie Bell to the stage. Thank you all for being here. I have a Blake and a Blade. Let's see if I can get this right. Well, it'll be a miracle.
Two of the greatest names.
So Blade, I'm going to come to you first. There have been some really exciting developments to improve transparency and traceability in our food and agriculture systems. Can you talk about why this matters?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think the biggest thing in today's traceability space is interoperability. How do different companies, customers, food suppliers all share data across the supply chain? And I'm going to quickly do an analogy. I would like everyone in the audience just to shake the hand of the person next to you or around you. Just do a quick handshake.
You got to shake my hand, sorry.
Quite. It's quite simple, right? Like, we all understand it. Now, remember that handshake that you did with your best friend when you were a kid, that you made up, the one that does all the things. Now do that with the person next to you.
I don't think I have one.
That's...
All right, Blade, you've made this go off the rails, so bring it back.
So the point there is, what I'm trying to demonstrate is its interoperability. The first point, we knew the handshake. It was easy to communicate. Across religions, across geographical spaces, across different cultures, everyone knows the introduction. When you bring in this level of confusion, awkwardness, that you don't know how to communicate, that's where traceability becomes quite difficult. And the reason why I say this is because a lot of customers, companies right now really want that traceable product, that traceable supply chain, but they don't know how to communicate that throughout the entire industry. The panel before us now, the three great women from the retail space, the question was, how do we work together? You need to work together to become a traceable supply chain, a traceable industry, bringing together that framework. I mean, that's, I think, why we all, these people are all sitting here, that framework, bringing together the global framework for the beef and the leather. That communication that we all understand, that's what's key. And that's the key driver right now in traceability. How do we promote that? How do we develop that?
Thank you so much. And Sophie, I want to turn to you next because you talked about, making your farm traceable because that will help your business. And I'm wondering if you can just expand on that. How does traceability and that transparency that you as a farmer have expand your business in a way that'll be profitable and also, sustainable?
Yeah, I'm going to use Irish wool as an example. At the moment in the UK and Ireland, it's deemed as a product that we don't use, we don't need. So therefore, farmers don't get paid appropriately. It actually costs them more to take the wool off the animal than, and that's the reality at the moment. However, because there is no traceability there is actually a huge market for wool in the UK and Ireland, and there are facilities there that can make this happen. But because there is no traceability or fair trade at the moment, we can actually advertise that we're selling Irish wool as a product, but it's actually imported for cheaper at the moment. So that's why farmers are losing out, because they're not getting paid appropriately, and you can actually import it in for cheaper. So that just goes to show you the issue when there is no traceability in a certain product. So that's why meat, for example, is a lot more profitable in comparison to maybe many years ago. Actually, in Ireland, we had sheep and we mainly profited off their wool. So it's just gone the other way, but I think it's going to make a real return in a few years' time. And I hope to make that happen myself. And yeah, we'll see.
You're working very hard to do that. I have confidence in you. On that point, Fernando, farmers are taking so many risks right now, and their whole job is risk, to be honest. How can we help them manage those risks as they transition to, better practices that encourage traceability and transparency? What kind of support do they actually need?
And I think that's an interesting point because as we're going through this climate week here, we're listening a lot about the need for measuring impacts, for managing those impacts, helping farmers to transition to better practices, incentives. But very often it's hard to achieve all those things if the downstream side of the activity doesn't know where products are coming from, doesn't know the farmers that are making those products. So we really need to connect the both ends of the supply chain. We need to connect the needs from brands, retailers, the need they have to manage their supply chains, manage their risks, ensure compliance, but also how we can support that transition from suppliers. And that's where we start engaging with this discussion about traceability. It becomes much easier for you to discuss any incentives to producers when you have that increased transparency, when you have visibility of where your products are coming from. And retailers, don't be afraid, we are not talking about premiums here, but there are many ways of incentivizing long-term relationship with farmers, better finance lines, which if you have visibility, if you have reduced risk, it's better also it's easier also to work with financiers, with investors to help that transition to supply chain. So it's really what we are trying, and I think you explained very well, I don't need you to explain anymore. It's really how to drive that collective action that was mentioned here in the panel with retailers, to start creating these more transparent supply chains that will allow different sectors to better support farmers in this transition.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Blake, there have to be tools in place that make transparency and traceability possible, right? How do you make those tools as easy as possible for farmers and others to take on?
Yeah, I think, we're talking about traceability and standardization. That is really what unlocks the ability to do scalable implementation. We're on the panel with Whole Chain today, which is a technology solution provider that has really been behind this movement for a decade now, right? But as we look across food systems, there's hundreds of different softwares that are used to collect data, to share data. Also, you've got to understand that a lot of farmers, and not even just farmers, but other parts of the supply chain still rely on collecting data on paper-based documentation, right? So it's being able to, instead of sending somebody a 50-page document to read and say, interpret this, understand how to contextualize this in your environment, how can we create tools that actually are, that they can use to understand that context. So some examples of things that we've created, and just a little bit of background on IFT, is we've been doing research and development in the science of traceability, data standardization, and interoperability for nearly 20 years. So we're a nonprofit entity that really helps to create these ecosystems of data sharing. So when we think about that data and how it needs to move throughout the pipeline, it's, okay, you've got paper-based documentation, you've got maybe digital tools that don't follow standards, and then you've got tools that do follow standards, that are actually interoperable. So an example of kind of how we're helping farmers or kind of upstream supply chain actors is by creating a tool where they can just use the documentation that they use today, invoices, purchase orders, processing slips, whatever, because a lot of that data is already captured, right? When we talk about traceability, it's the who, what, when, where of a product as it moves throughout a supply chain. So can we just say, hey, use this tool, dump those documents in. Essentially, this tool can look at it and say, what is this representing? Is this a harvest event? Were you shipping a product to a customer? Was that customer receiving product? Were they transforming something? And then what were the data elements that are required based on these standards to be collected? And it really helps them move through that process and understand sort of the gaps in the data that they're may not be collecting, or just how close they are to actually reaching these standards out of the gate, because what we've seen is 80-90% compliance, because it is that kind of baseline traceability data. Also creating open source tools to help the technology parts of the supply chain. As I said, there could be 1,000, 10,000 different digital tools across all these different systems. So we've created open source tools to help them basically just map the data that they're already collecting, and tools just to reformat it. And then also it has an existing communication protocol or API, how that data is actually communicated from one software to the next. And with these sorts of tools, we've done 2 case studies that have resulted in showing 60 to 75% reduction in implementation time. So it's really trying to help each of the stakeholders, which is a wide number of stakeholders involved.
Yeah.
But it's important for the brands and retailers to support these sorts of initiatives. But the real work is that implementation in the supply chain.
Yeah.
And that's where we try to bring our experience to help.
Thank you. These tools that Blake is talking about work really good in seafood. They're working in leather. How can they be used in other sectors and other commodities?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is, we've done a lot of work in seafood. We're really building off of 10 years of experience in doing this in seafood and applying that to beef and leather. But the reality is it's product traceability that we're dealing with. So really the next phase of this work is putting together this package of knowledge, of tools, of resources, of a kind of common core data standard that can be applied to anything.
Yeah, like a toolkit.
Right, because it's traceability. It's not seafood traceability. It's not beef traceability. It is traceability, and that's really important, especially as you think the conversion of these commodities in the supply chain eventually at a distribution center, at a retail location. They don't want to have to do something for beef and leather, something for seafood. They want a harmonized approach across all the commodities that they trade.
Fernando and Blade, I'd love you both to comment on this as well.
Yeah. No, and I think this is where it's when we start adding value to downstream buyers. We started this work just going back a bit from a leather perspective, working with large international leather users, buyers, and we understood that they don't work in an isolated world. They need to work with suppliers that are part of the beef sector, and we understood that the only way of getting traceability data for that sector was by aligning with what's happening on the food side, on the beef sector. But as we evolved the discussion, we worked together in creating this traceability framework for beef and leather. We understood that you really add value to retailers, to brands, when you start going beyond this specific commodity, and when you create this more commodity agnostic environment. The good news is that you have it ready for seafood, you have it ready now and being implemented for beef and leather. We are moving forward this more commodity agnostic, but we do need brands, we do need retailers to engage, solution providers to work with us. We are not talking, IFT, whole chain, other partners have been key in those things. We are trying to do everything that is possible to make this process easier, more cost efficient. But now it's really about going back to the retailer panel, about collective action, about really synergies and start driving that adoption through more interoperable systems.
Great. Blade, standardization is really going to help make this easier, yeah?
Exactly. I mean, going off of what you guys both said now, the whole point of commodity agnostic is the framework of the whole chain. Just to give you guys some context, what EPCIS is, which is the framework behind all of these different models here, it says that you take your standard business processes and you convert them into easily understandable events. So for example, in our whole chain system, we have an event called a commission event. Now that means any business process that brings the start of a particular lot or batch into existence. This can be in the beef supply chain, in the farm. This can be in a catch event when you're actually catching it on the vessel of a boat. This can be in a farm harvest of an agricultural farm. So if you design it in a method that can be used across commodities, commodity agnostic, you are not siloing off every single of your retailers in a specific species, allowing everyone in the party to use it. That's the biggest thing, and that's what whole chain is designed around. We also want to give value to our customers other than just tracking and tracing the products. How can we perform additional value? At the end of the day, we're trying to take a siloed system, so you've got siloed approaches in your supply chain, And we're trying to create an entire infrastructure around these siloed companies can operate. Me as a buyer, I can see all the way through to the first mile actor in the supply chain. And by allowing everyone to do that, you can additionally add value, shared labels that can go across the entire industry. You can have shared documentation that goes across the entire supply chain. It's not only about tracing, but adding that additional value that the customers and the retailers can also understand and get out of just being traceable is the key aspect here as well.
Yeah. Sophie, we've heard about the value of traceability here, and I want you to sort of, look at your crystal ball in the future, 5 years on your farm. What will that transparency look like if everything goes sort of as planned for you?
I think I'd be able to provide an income for my small farm that's deemed as something that's not profitable at the moment. And that's the reality for a lot of people in Ireland. And I think if I was able to have a food business directly on my farm where I can directly show the full transparency, the traceability, and exactly where the food came from, and if that was easy and that was made accessible for me, like there is a huge burden of paperwork that you have to go through if you're going down that route. And if that problem is solved, that would be really accessible for me, and I could pursue that dream and that passion that I have. And it would set a whole standard for agriculture in Ireland, and a lot of other people I speak to in the industry want to do that, but it's just that block that's there at the moment that makes them afraid to go down that route. And I think that would really set a whole new standard for Irish agriculture, where people can provide food directly from their farm. And I think that's what people want as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that point about the barriers and the challenges, what would you all see from, from the policy end, what would you need? So maybe Blade, you go first. What kind of policies would make whole chain's job easier?
Well, you've got things like in the US, you've got the FSMA 204 regulation that's coming out at the moment that basically says that you've got to have lot-based or batch-based traceability all the way down to that first mile actor. It allows this is a food safety regulation that's come out, allowing it anyone in the chain to track down where it goes. Because often what happens now is a product is received at a particular warehouse. That product has a particular batch number, batch 123 or ABC. It gets to a warehouse, and the warehouse will reassign that batch number or that lot number based on where it's situated now in their warehouse. So a retailer might now change the batch number. That becomes incredibly difficult to then, if it's just got a single supplier and a single customer, yes, it might be a bit easier. But when you've got quite a large supply chain, and you're having these lot numbers and batch numbers are constantly changing across every single actor, when a recall comes into play, or because there's a food safety issue in the supply chain, it becomes quite challenging to track that down. I mean, you always say a recall's maybe much easier at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon. Everyone's at the office. Recall becomes a lot more difficult when it's Saturday at 10 p.m. at night or 2 a.m. in the morning. No one's at the office, no one there that you can quickly call that next actor. So that kind of regulatory change that brings across not allowing the lot numbers or the batch numbers to actually change unless there's some sort of kill step involved, that really does make traceability a lot easier. And that's the kind of regulation we do need for sure.
Sure. Because we only have a minute left, Sophie, and I want you to have the last word. If Minister Dooley had been able to be here today, from a policy standpoint, as a young farmer, what would you want to ask from him, especially on this point of traceability and transparency?
I would ask him, I'd like him to ask us, what can we do for you? How can we directly support you and help you and make you feel supported mentally and financially? And I think that, and to genuinely listen and to pursue what we've said and to speak on behalf of all the young people in Ireland. I think if he takes that away and puts that into place, I'd be very happy.
Perfect point to end on. Please give them a round of applause, everyone. Thank you all so much. Now I'd like to invite Mahina Cole, the Sustainable Finance Coordinator for the Micronesia Conservation Trust, for her 2-minute remarks.
Thank you, Danny. So now I want to tell you how we plan on leveraging traceability for Pacific Island tuna. And over half the world's skipjack tuna comes from 8 Pacific Island nations. And for decades, they've generated value primarily from selling the right to fish, but the canning, the branding, the retailing is actually where most of the value is made, and that's all captured by someone else. And now these nations are no longer content to just sell the right to fish, and they're after owning more of the value chain themselves. And there's already a company doing just that, Pacific Island Tuna. It is a Marshallese cooperative that is owned by the National Fisheries Authority and the Nature Conservancy, and they own the fish from the dock to the final product. It has supplied a major US retailer's brand of tuna for the past 5 years. It's MSC certified, and 40% of profits go directly back to community-based conservation. So if you just think about what this can really is, it's doing 3 things at once. It's economic value flowing back to Pacific resource owners. It's tuna from one of the best managed fisheries on Earth. And it's a direct contribution to conservation for communities living in one of the most climate vulnerable regions. And now I'm leading the development of a tuna bond to scale Pacific Island tuna, and anchored by standardized traceability with whole chain that meets EU and US requirements, because traceability isn't just a compliance burden, it is the on-ramp onto your shelves. And here's what makes it work: your shelf space. When a buyer commits directly to this tuna, that contract is what lets the cooperative compete with large industry players. And by shortening the supply chain, more value reaches the Pacific resource owners, and it lowers the cost of goods for you. And we're actively building this now, and we're looking for the people in this room who can make it happen. And so if you're interested, I'd love to talk. Thank you.
Could be with us today. So now we're going to shift gears. You know, I've been talking a lot actually, about the International Year of the Women Farmer. And so we've been recognizing the ways women support food and agriculture systems as producers, as caregivers, as innovators, as leaders. But women can't build resilient farms and communities without the resources, without access to the resources that protect their own health and well-being. So that's the focus of this next conversation, on the link between women's health and climate resilience. And I can think of no better person to have this conversation with than Nabiha Kazi-Hutchins, who's a dear friend and board member of Food Tank and the president and CEO of PAI. Please give her a round of applause as she joins me. This woman is a powerhouse. So happy to see you. So you and I had this brief discussion last night about, you know, this whole Climate Week programming. We talk a lot about infrastructure and resilience to the climate crisis. None of that can happen without women, though.
That's right.
They're the most important infrastructure.
They're absolutely the most important infrastructure. And, you know, we're here talking about food systems and sustainable food systems, agriculture, the systems that power agriculture, and we consistently overlook, or at least not center and bring forward, the role of women and how women are powering our food systems. And if we are saying women are central to food systems, women's health is central to food systems. And if we drill down further, it's women's reproductive health, their safety, their security, their ability to decide when and if to become pregnant, who to be a partner with, to be able to go to school safely, to have access not only to the physical infrastructure and resources that powers the economies of countries around the world, but that they have the resources to power their own ambitions.
And the threats to women's health, especially reproductive health, have had major changes over the last 18 months. And I think if you can center us in what's happened.
Yeah, it's been huge. I mean, we of course, I lead a global sexual and reproductive health and rights policy advocacy and research organization. We've never taken funding from the US government, but we are based in the US. And the elephant in the room is the US government's decision to withdraw foreign assistance and not support issues that are fundamental to the rights of communities, to their health, to their well-being, to their safety and security. So the U.S.'s decision and withdrawal, of course, has huge effects on the livelihoods of communities around the world. But we're also seeing this around the world in other countries. The reductions in ODA, foreign assistance, for a range of reasons. And I won't comment in terms of why countries are making those decisions. But of course, we know so much is going into military and defense, and that's their prerogative. But it does have this effect on communities around the world. And if I can just finer point on the U.S.'s withdrawal from foreign assistance. There was recent research out of the Lancet that said by 2030, we can expect 14 million more deaths as a result of that withdrawal. I also want to underscore that not all is lost. This is definitely an opportunity for us to say, was that aid designed and constructed in the right way? And PAI works with civil society organizations in over 35 countries, a huge network of local grassroots organizations, women-led organizations, youth-led organizations, and they consistently step up to the plate. And now they're partnering with their governments, with members of parliament, with other advocates to say, what does the new infrastructure, not just about development, but how we sustainably feed, nourish, ensure the safety, security, feed women and young people in our communities, and do it on our own terms.
Yeah, and you've been here at Climate Week trying to convince the private sector and the business world that this is important. How do you do that?
I think we just have to recognize who are the producers and who are the customers. You know, when I looked at the esteemed guest list for this event, for all the corporations in particular, for all the corporations that are here, your number one customer are women, and your number one producer of those goods and services are also women. If we look specifically in the developing world, 43% of the agricultural farming community are women. And those same women are the ones who are on the front lines who are powering the global agricultural economy, the food systems, with whether that be cocoa or cotton or grains or mint. All of this is produced in hard labor by women, and also their innovation. And so when we look at that, we say, okay, this is a critical audience for sustainable food systems, but we also need to make sure that they are healthy, that they have access to reproductive health care, that they are safe and secure. And you know, that bottom line is a pitch, is when you have healthy, vibrant societies, you also have healthy, vibrant women who can make decisions, and at the same time, that is securing your markets, and that's continuing to supply the essential nutrition and food that the world needs.
They're your producers, they're your consumers,
Absolutely.
They have to be part of the equation. When we're talking about climate resilience, women and girls are disproportionately impacted by the climate crisis. But when we put measures in place that build climate resilience, the impacts on women are extraordinary.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk about what is the impact with climate resilience, if you'll allow me to do that. So we know around the world there's so many disparities already, even when there isn't a crisis, and when there isn't a financial crisis, when there isn't a climate crisis, a humanitarian crisis, women and young people, and young women in particular, are always at risk of huge health disparities and a lot of issues that get in the way of them being able to achieve their ambitions. When we are facing climate crises, let's just look at what it does for the safety and security of women. I'm part of the Spotlight Initiative, in addition to being a very proud board member of Food Tank. And there was recent research that came out that showed that 1 degree Celsius increase in temperature leads to up to a 5% increase in violence against women by intimate partners. When we look at, as I mentioned, the ability to make a decision of if and when to become pregnant, when there is a climate crisis, you see we expect 14 million more women between now and the next decade not having access to family planning and contraceptive services. And then you also see escalation in female genital mutilation and cutting. You see increases in unintended, as I said, unintended pregnancies and child marriage. In my home, I was born in Pakistan, grew up in Mexico, and in my in my birth state or province in Pakistan, when we had the floods a few years ago, there were 600,000 women who were pregnant and did not have any access to reproductive health care. So all of this just gets exacerbated. And our priority in all of this is when we're talking about critical infrastructure, when we're talking about resilience, we have to center the most critical component, an underlying component, which is women and their health, and of course, access to sexual and reproductive health.
Yeah. So when we talk about this, and it seems so obvious to people like you and me and many people in this room, when it's not to policymakers, when it's not to, investors, when it's not to, the banking and insurance sectors, how do we convince them?
Yeah, this is where civil society comes in. I started my career in HIV, and I'm also a very proud daughter of an agricultural scientist. I grew up, and I was very fortunate. I grew up with agricultural giants in Mexico. My father was a wheat breeder and worked alongside Dr. Norman Borlaug, who many of you may know was the Nobel Peace Prize laureate for the Green Revolution. I'm very proud of that heritage, and they would always say, and this is very much instilled in me, and I think if we look at movements and change, they don't happen at the hands of government. They don't happen at the hands of industry. They don't happen at the hands of research institutions. They happen at the hands of people. And when communities and constituents are speaking up, when they're holding leadership accountable, when they're taking evidence and research and informing how we transform change, that is what's sustained. And I will also say that I think private sector does it very well. Private sector, by the nature of private sector, knows that all these different components of society need to work together. You need civil society because they are the trusted resources in community. They can inform and they can de-risk investments as well before big investments are made. You need government to ensure that the policy environment is favorable. You need people to want to access your goods and services. And so I think this is an opportunity for us to be much more intentional about coming together and not just saying we're going to stick in our sector, in our silo, but say how do we redesign in a way that brings all of us together, because ultimately this is about the safety, security, and nourishment of the world.
Yeah, on that intentionality point, we talked about courage and bravery earlier. This is a time in this world that, or a time in history that I have never sort of had to navigate in quite the same way. How do you encourage that bravery and that intentionality when forces seem to be against us?
I say let's not be scared of what's happening. And one piece is look for the other ways in. Make sure you keep your advocates and your close champions for these issues close, but also don't be afraid to step out and talk to others. Even if they're not going to use the same language as you, even if they may have a different orientation, I think we can all come together on what is fundamental. We all have women in our lives. We all have children in our lives, one way or the other. I think, and I'm going to speak to the women in the audience, I suspect many of you, or hopefully all of you are here because you had the ability to make a choice about your health, about your reproductive rights, about the spaces that you are going to step up in leadership. And we need to ensure that those who are producing what has enabled us to get to this level, who are producing and supporting communities around the world, have those same privileges.
Right, absolutely. When we talk about different ways of collaborating, that also requires bravery and just suggestions for people in this room to break out of those silos. You talk about women as really important pieces of agricultural infrastructure. Listening is a huge part of agricultural infrastructure that we're losing. How do we listen to those folks that we don't agree with?
I say always go to the community and work closely with community advocates, those who are working. I mean, we just had some incredible female farmers who are running their organizations. Farms are organizations. They're the CEOs of their enterprises. And PAI just did a huge global civil society survey. Vast majority of respondents came from the global south, the global majority. And communities are already working across sectors. 90% of those who responded, over 90% are working working in women's health, reproductive health, and 100% are also working across different sectors. They said climate, they said agriculture, they said education. So I don't think we need to start from scratch. I think we have to go to civil society, we have to go to women and young people in local communities and say, how are you all integrating? Because we don't have the resources that we used to have. And I think it's a great opportunity for us to listen to community and design with that in mind.
Because organizations like PAI and many others don't have the resources they used to have, what would you want? How do you want people to support these efforts? And I mean, financially, finances are needed.
Absolutely, finances are needed, resources are needed, and not just for PAI, but also for civil society around the world, for us to hold institutions accountable. I always say is, and I know that this is. We have individuals from all sectors, but if you are putting forth something that is good and helpful, a new innovation, introducing things to markets that will make the lives of farmers, the lives of women, the health of children better, you also need independent accountability mechanisms and independent advocates to say, this science is good and can be trusted, or to flag for an entity that's investing billions of dollars in shaping food systems and coming up with innovation to say, you know what, this is your blind spot because it's not going to land with local communities. So let's figure out how to solve for that.
Yeah.
And so I just think there's so much opportunity for us to really think about what we support, how we support, do it flexibly, keep an open mind, and let's talk to each other.
Absolutely. You brought up a good point. There have been so many attacks on science-based evidence, and I feel like this is especially true when we're talking about women's health. Counteracting those arguments has to be a huge part of your job right now.
It's a huge part of our job, absolutely. There is a saying that, and you all probably are familiar with I'm forgetting the name of the book. There was a book that basically said a lie can spread in an instant.
Right.
And truth and fact and science doesn't always get the same attention, and perhaps we're overcomplicating the message.
Sure.
As I think that's also part of it. I mean, again, being the daughter of a scientist, an agricultural scientist, I take that very much to heart. And I think we have to say, if we've got research, we've got evidence, we've got data, let's not just be happy with it getting published in peer-reviewed journals. We have to ask the question, and we also have to fund the translation of that evidence, the amplification of that evidence, because those who are anti-science, anti-fact, are absolutely, they are funding. Do what you want. Say what you want, and they fund for the long term. And why is it that the good information that can solve problems, that can change the entire trajectory of communities, ends up living in very smart, intelligent, peer-reviewed journals?
Yeah.
We need to get it out to the people. And that's where communities and civil society, and not just PAI, but the coalitions that we are in, including Food Tank. I mean, this is so much of the work that you're also doing, is to be able to share what we know works and how do we shape better response in times of crisis, but also to sustain that in times of plenty and prosperity.
Thank you. I want to end on, I've been asking for a to-do for these audiences for the last 2 days. What do you want them to do? This is a lot of information to take in. It's a lot of, there's so much opportunity, but we're seeing so much loss at the same time. And I want to leave people with hope.
Yeah. Well, in terms of what to do first is push within your organizations to redefine and reframe what resilience is. As Dan and I were talking about last night, again, when we talk about infrastructure and infrastructure being resilient in times of crisis, we often end up talking about bricks and mortar, right? We talk about food systems and supply chains and health clinics and schools. The most critical infrastructure are women and women's health and women's reproductive health. And that means making the investments holistically, making the investments and supporting family planning, telling governments, you know what, if we're gonna be in your markets and you want your communities to prosper from these benefits, we also need you to invest in women's reproductive health care and make that a priority and have laws and policies that support the freedom and autonomy of women and young people. I think that is absolutely critical. So many corporations, of course, have their ESG targets, have their corporate social responsibility priorities, center not just the efficiency and effectiveness of contributions to a better planet, but also see and look at what is the place of women who are part of your supply chain, who are part of your customer base. The hope for me, I think this is exactly what is inspiring me right now, is 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, as a child growing up in Mexico at CIMMYT, we weren't having the conversations around agriculture and food system sustainability and climate and centering women and women's reproductive health care. So this gives me hope that we can have these conversations together and we can come together. We need absolutely more of it, but I think just having those conversations and elevating awareness also then makes people think about how do I redesign my response and how do we fund it?
Yeah, it's such a different way of thinking. It leaves me with hope.
Yeah.
Thank you, Nabiha.
Thank you, Danny.
Thank you for your work. Please give her a huge round of applause. So we're going to have a really interesting conversation right now, right, Kenzie Osliger? Okay. We're going to get started with this next session. It's a very interactive one, and you'll get a break from me. So in this conversation, we're going to dive into new research about Gen Z eaters. I'm going to step aside and turn it over to Dorothy Shaver, such a good friend of Food Tank, the Global Food Sustainability Lead at Unilever, and Bianca Brown, a Senior Account Manager for Digital at Edelman. Over to you, friends.
We'll miss you. Okay. So you're not getting a break, so I'm just going to ask you to please stand up. And those of you who are on break, there's no break. So grab your donut and come back in. Okay, just bring your arms up, shake everything out. Just get a little loosey-goosey. We're going to talk about Gen Z. How many of you in here do think that you're Gen Z? How many of you are actually Gen Z? How many of you know somebody who's Gen Z? Now, the age is 14 to 29. Yes. Ish? Yeah. Okay. Okay, great. Now, you can take a seat if you want. You can also stay standing if you want. So what we're going to talk to you about today is some research that we've done with Unilever together with Edelman about the Gen Z population. So before we get started with the incredible insights that you'll hear today, I'm going to ask Bianca to tell us why we're talking about Gen Z, and also, of course, introduce yourself as a Gen Z.
I will. Hello, I am the Gen Z.
Turns out Gen Z loves to hold a big prop.
You know what we're like on social media? We have a mic with us, so I wanted this one. Yes, Gen Z are a largely influential cohort of generation, right? So we report of them being at about 2.5 billion members on the planet, and with a spending power of $12 trillion. So the assumption is that Gen Z are broke and a minority. It is not the case. The numbers do not lie. I didn't make those up. And they are largely influential because they are shaping food culture as we know it. They are influencing multi-generational households and the purchasing decisions of those households. And they are really setting new expectations for what food behaviors look like, what food should deliver en masse. And so this research has been really interesting to see and to reveal. So I'm really excited to talk about it today.
Super. So what we did was Unilever paired with Edelman to take a look at 3 critical areas that we're focused on. One is around improving the way that we grow our food to implement sustainable and regenerative practices. The second one is around what we provide, which is positive nutrition. And the third pillar is around how we package, which is better and less packaging overall. So what we did is we took a look at actually 7 different markets: UK, US, Brazil, China, Germany, Hungary, and India. Got it? I didn't even look. For us to really see what the insights are in these groups, understanding that we do need to grow the demand of better food to this particular cohort. So, spoiler alert, this incredibly important cohort is really interested in foods that are better for them, for their body, and that is better for the environment around them. That means that we need to start to pay extra close attention to the foods that are actually higher in nutritional value and lower in environmental impact. Now, we are not doing that generally as an industry, so we have to do some work to figure out what exactly they're interested in, how to take that across to them in a compelling and cool way, and how to really bring that back to really drive that demand side. So that's what we're going to talk to you about today. Now, this is not some huge piece of research that's going to show up in a scientific publication. It's a top-line level piece of work that was done through social media listening overall, some workshops, some individual interviews, and some quantitative analysis. So Just so we're all clear on that, we'll share some insights, which is from aggregated data across all the markets relevant to both retail and food service. As you know, Unilever has both sides of that. So it's relevant to both sides of that. And if you want specifics on any specific market in a specific area, please feel free to reach out and we can share more on that. But this is just aggregated data. We are very quick, and pay attention because we are going to ask you some questions at the end.
Yes, so when we looked at the results of our research in general, we found obviously a variety of statistics that we will go through in this session, but what was really the most revealing was a clear say-do gap between what Gen Z were thinking, feeling, and the actual actions that they had around their food behaviors. And now we did see that there was a clear expectation from Gen Z about food being good and being clean. But what we really, really understood and underlined and were really excited by was the opportunity that they posed, that this meaning of good, this word good that they used, is having a really sort of changing definition. And so it's really forcing us to think differently about what good and clean means to this generation. Good could mean good for the planet. It could mean good for people, but it also could mean, it also has to carry the sort of weight of culture, identity, of perspective and class even in times. And so we're really trying to reshape our thinking around what good food means to them. And I really want to ask you, Dorothy, what that sort of say-do gap has made you think and feel as we looked at the data in general.
Sure. So I think the main thing is that there's a major opportunity for us to close that say-do gap. So as we go through these insights, the things that we really need to start to think about, those of us who have power, which are many of us in this room, when it comes to brands, when it comes to food experiences, when it comes to different types of influencing, it's up to us to really figure out how do we change that say-do gap. Because if they're saying that they really want foods that are better for them, better for the planet, higher in nutritional value, feel better to them from a well-being perspective, from an energy perspective, and they also understand how, where, and what foods are grown and how it gets into their products and into their body, it's up to us to really figure out compelling ways to close that gap and make foods that are better for them accessible, affordable, and enjoyable. So we really need to take a look at what we're doing as an industry, as food system change makers, to close that gap. So what they say is actually what they're able to do. So that provocation to you is, what are some of the levers that you have that you can pull to enable this shift to go a little bit faster? This is a major opportunity for us. It's a huge population of people. It's a huge cohort when it comes to financial. It's a huge cohort when it comes to influential across all the markets. Therefore, what are you going to do? What levers do you have in your power to shift that a little bit more to close that gap?
Okay, let's think specifically about growing and about regenerative practices. Some of the stats that I will read say that 27% trusted traditional health authorities, but this is in comparison to 64% who said they trust someone who is just like me. So we're really seeing a widening gap between an authority practice there. Another one said that when it comes to sustainability, there were 2/3 that required certification or quantification to believe claims. So again, that gap we're seeing is present in the data. They're not trusting authority in general, but they need some sort of backing with data, with evidence, with quantifiable numbers. One of our workshops that we ran said that people are going to scroll past the term regenerative agriculture. I mean, before I worked on this piece, would have done so as well. And so how can we change our language in that sense to make sure this is accessible conversation? And finally, one that's really, really poignant, over 2 in 3 were trusting outlets that reward honesty and they acknowledge progress rather than claiming perfection. So there is an understanding, there is a grace when it comes to making claims, discussing regenerative agriculture. And these stats were really, really interesting when it comes to how we're growing sustainable food.
Super. So that means there's some great opportunities for us who are working in the spaces of improving the amount of ingredients and the quantity of ingredients grown following sustainable and regenerative practices. Because it's really not about perfection. They're not looking to us for perfection. They're not looking for us for huge, ambitious goals. What they're looking for is stories about where their ingredients come from, how their products are made, and how they're also packaged. And so that's up to us to really say, how do we build that trust when we talk about the way that ingredients are grown? Now, let's be totally honest. to communicate about the way foods are grown, sustainably sourced, following regenerative practices is under a huge amount of scrutiny now, right? We basically can't do it. A lot of our brands, including maybe some of the ones that I have worked on, have backed away from talking about it at all as a result of that. Now, if we back away completely of communicating about what we're doing from a sustainable sourcing perspective or following regenerative practices, there is a little bit of a likelihood that potentially the businesses will stop funding because it is not driving the demand, right? So we need demand and supply. That's how everything runs. So if we don't have the demand for foods that are grown better, then the likelihood the supply of foods that are grown better will potentially go down. So when you think of the value chain, which I always ask people to think about, we need to have farmers that want to grow foods in better ways, and we need to have consumers purchasing foods that are grown in better ways. And then that really drives the scale that we need to have to make it not niche, but norm to be grown better. And the reason why foods need to be grown better, all of you know, is so that we can drive a more resilient food system to enable us to continue to feed people. So therefore, this is an absolutely critical thing for us to do. Yes, it takes a lot of resource, time, cost for us to make sure that we are really making that compelling statement, but it's worth it. So when we think about competitive edge, what we think about is the non-competitive part happens on the ground. We work collaboratively when it comes to working together with suppliers, working together with farmers, getting those practices in at scale, at a whole supply shed level, right? Then the competitive edge is creativity, believe it or not. It's about how you actually embed these messages into your brand, into your experience, into your platform to really show that it's something that's absolutely cool and compelling and makes sense for your brand. And that's really the way that we have to continue to think about it. We can't just drop the consumer part, because then that value chain will not move and we won't be able to do what we want to do at scale. Many of us have potentially done that in our value propositions for obvious reasons, and we need to change our mind so that that whole value chain is able to move.
Definitely. And we do see in the data that Gen Z are looking for this kind of communication. They're looking for that creativity as well as the benefits of positive nutrition. So some of the stats that align with that, 63% said they actually do want to know the functional benefits that food is providing. 62% said they would rather know what food is giving them rather than what is excluded from the foods. 73% said they consume for energy. 61% said they consume for mental well-being. They're looking for these amazing things that come from the way that regenerative agriculture is producing cleaner foods. And 22%, only 22% said that they are following a restrictive diet. So there is no way that they're holding back from the kinds of things that we're talking about today.
So I think just to kind of take a step back, what we've already looked at is the say-do gap, and then we looked at the way that foods are grown. Now we're looking at what food provides. And that's a really interesting pillar for this very, very important cohort, because they're looking for foods that are making them feel better emotionally and physically. That's an enormous opportunity if you're someone who happens to be a nutritionist and you've been trying to do this for your whole life. It actually is a huge time for us to say, look, we actually have foods that are great for you, and they actually are very highly functional. And we can find those foods that are at the exact intersection of better for people and better for the planet and tell those incredible stories in highly functional, energetic, cool ways to really make them the norm as opposed to the niche. And now is the time. This is a hugely influential group. And if we're able to influence them by talking to people like them, if you heard the trust thing, then we are able to really move it forward. So what this group is looking for is brands that are worth trusting, that are talking about what they're doing from an honest perspective and providing them with something that's enjoyable, convenient, affordable, and makes them feel good. And that's the opportunity that we have in the room as huge change makers to really take this into our hands. So my provocation for you with that is, how are you going to make better foods cooler, compelling, really convenient in your store, really the ones that show up. When you go to shop online, some of you I know are in that cohort, when you go to shop online, what foods do you want people to see first? And what do you want them to say? And what are we going to see when we walk into a store? And what are we going to be producing when we look at our innovation and renovation lines? And this is what you need to be thinking about as you move forward. Of course, fiber, protein, and gut health were at the top, and you hopefully know that. And the way that we bring that forward is what's going to make it the really competitive edge. So the competitive edge remains in the creativity, in the way we bring it across, and the way we embed these insights, and the collaboration lies on the field.
I want to wrap with talking about packaging because this is the best way to communicate all of these things that we're talking to you about today. And some of our data did show that packaging was insanely important when communicating this at the immediate point of purchase, right? It was obviously the most tangible signal. If Gen Z see plastic, they automatically think not good, right? 80% of value refill, reuse condiment systems in restaurants. And so when we're thinking about food service, the ways that it's packaged and the automatic signal that these show to Gen Z are communicating this to, as quickly as they can. And so that's why it's so important to think about the way that we can creatively change the way we package and communicate the imperative of demand. Plastic was a really big one, specifically in Brazil and India. If anyone has relevancy in those markets, come and ask more questions.
Super. So what that says is really that sustainability really comes to life in the package. It's the most tangible way for us to show that we're doing the right thing for people and the right thing for planet. But the main thing that really came through also is that they're looking to us to make this packaging actually easier to reuse, easier to compost. They're not looking to do something extra. They actually need that package to be beautiful, convenient, and usable, and better for the planet. And that's what they're looking at. When you think about people looking at a shelf, they're looking at the packages. If your package seems to look more sustainable, and whatever that means, it's green, it's cardboardy looking, it's all these things, then you are more likely to get chosen. So that's a huge thing for us to really look at, is the proof is really in the packaging. So that's going to actually wrap up all of the insights that we had in rapid fire. And the provocation now to you, so we're going to get some microphones out. I don't know how much time we have, because this will go on for the rest of my life if you let it. But this is absolutely not a Q&A. You are not asking me questions, to be clear. I have asked you some questions about you in this room as some of, if arguably not the most, powerful change makers in the world. What are you going to do with these insights that actually show something that you potentially have been ignoring for a very long time, which is that people actually want food that is highly functional, physically, emotionally, and environmentally? So, I'm going to ask you to share something either you would like to do or something that you are doing that really does adhere to this. How are you breaking ground with Gen Z? How are you showing up for Gen Z? How are you making sure that you're trusted? What are some insights that you have? So this is time for sharing. This is not time for bragging. Let me be very clear about that, because we've all heard quite a few brags this week, I betcha. So let's hear about it. Somebody raise your hand and tell me something amazing that you're doing that you'd like to share.
Oh, sorry. Thanks. Hi, I'm Claire. I work for Airfield Estate, which is a 38-acre city farm in Dublin. Shout out to Team Ireland. The ladies today, you were amazing.
Yay, Team Ireland!
We are an education charity, and when I joined a couple of years ago, my own board were like, Claire, get a few young people on the board. We said no, and we set up Airfield's first youth board, which is 12 young people from around the island of Ireland. Some come from farms, some come from up the road in Dublin. Their job is to bring their youth voice to our decision making,
I love
board decisions. They did this amazing piece of research about young people's attitudes to food systems in Ireland. And interesting, when young people think about careers in food, they think chef or farmer. There's nothing wrong with those careers, but there's many of us who work in the sector and they're just not thinking about these careers when they're making decisions. So Youth Board, the way of the future.
Super, love it. Get their voices in the room. Wonderful one, wonderful one. And some more, let me see your hands. Otherwise, I'm going to ask you what you actually are doing.
Hi, I'm Emma from AgriBot, which is not important, but I recently ran a day for SEND children, and building on that career question, we had speakers from the whole supply chain, and the kids went around asking questions and collecting stickers and learning what careers there were. And it was really important for them to understand what regen is and these labels and make those choices, for them to have that education on what is on a farm and what they can do and the work that goes in behind their food.
Super, love it, well done. We're going to take two more. One over here.
Awesome. Thank you very much for sharing. We work with the food banks in Europe, and how we work is through the 100,000 volunteers that work every year with us. Sometimes it becomes 700,000 when we're doing the big collections. Many of them are young people who are very motivated to do something about the environment, because there's a lot of waste over 50 million tons of food get wasted. But they believe that we can do better with that food, and they work very much with us to do that. And I think all the partners that work with us and those volunteers that are working with us are also consumers and also interested in changing the status quo. So thank you very much.
Super. Thank you. Well done. Thank you. Okay, couple more.
Good afternoon, Ada here from TikTok.
Great. Good one. You have a huge opportunity here.
Lots of pressure. You talked about peer-to-peer. We've launched a program, Brazil, Indonesia, and now in the UK, which is about food, nudging and giving food education to people on the platform about healthy eating behaviors. In Brazil, we recruited 30 creators, not all young, but many of them young, with a combined following of 16 million people. And in 5 months, their messaging has reached over 1.5 billion video views.
Super.
Right? And it's about working with the corresponding ministry, the right food banks, and incorporating that into a strategy that then they go out and give the messaging in their own quirky ways, with their own humor, in their own regional dialects and manners. Some are small business owners, some are students, some are from all walks of life, including chefs, and that's how we're doing that peer-to-peer messaging around healthy food behaviors.
Super. Thank you.
Amazing.
We'll take one more. Okay, we have one more right here. Last one, then we'll close this up.
Oh, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah from the Bionutrient Institute in a US-based NGO. Can I say well done on making it such an engaging and an exciting presentation. Dorothy, have you been in musical theatre?
People always say that. Maybe that's next. No, I haven't.
Really wonderful. What we are doing is working on basically building a Pokemon Go for fresh produce to help Gen Z go on the hunt for the best fresh produce in terms of bricks reading. We're calling it the Brexit app. Very apt given the 10-year anniversary of the Brexit. But
that wasn't really the topic.
It's actually based on the bricks readings that were like, it's a 180-year-old refractometer. Really cheap, accessible, but helps them to understand how good that food is, and it's a starting point
Pokemon.
For nutrient variation.
I love that.
Love games.
Super.
That's fun.
Well done. Okay, give all of yourselves a big round of applause. Okay. I'm just going to close it up here a little bit. So the consistency across the market was absolutely striking. Really think about it. Different markets, different cultures, different groups of people. But the same signal emerged again and again, which is that they are looking to food producers, food companies, retailers, TikTok influencers, and many more to really move this forward to close that gap, because they are looking for foods that are better for them and better for the planet in better packaging. So I'm going to leave this room with one little tiny challenge, which is that if Gen Z already wants better food, what are we doing to make sure they can actually choose it? From an affordability perspective, from a convenience perspective, from a cool perspective, and making sure that better food is available in convenience stores, in markets, on streets, in cafeterias, on all your apps, and in every single one of your homes. And that's absolutely the opportunity that we have right here. So we just shared some top-line insights with you today, and you are the people who can make these changes. And you have the opportunity, if not the obligation, to go ahead and take this time in this highly disruptive space in food, and take the time where Gen Z wants this from every single one of you. So you have to drop your excuses and stop saying they don't want it, nobody cares about it, and make them care about it. They care about it, and you now need to deliver. So we look forward to hearing from you. If you want to hear any more specifics, we'll be around. I'll be around for the rest of the day, and you can contact me in many other ways. And with that, we will leave you to the next fabulous panel. Thank you so much. Thank you to Food Tank.
Amazing. Thank you, Bianca.
Thank you to Food Tank.
Thank you.
A huge thank you to Edelman and an enormous thank you to Unilever for bringing this piece alive.
Woo! Dorothy and Bianca brought up the energy in this room. I love it. So our next conversation is in partnership with the Landscape Alliance. It's so important because as the Earth's climate changes, we have to think about adapting to hotter, drier environments. In this session, we're going to talk about what the future looks like, the science that will support crops that thrive in these conditions, and the business models that will help us build long-term resilience. So joining us, we have Eliane Ubalajoro, the CEO of the Landscape Alliance. Please give them a round of applause. Kashyap Kapagantulu, the co-founder and CEO of Ketje. Sorry. We have Helmi Bulush, the CEO of Sechem. Give him a round of applause. And Miriam Sabide is the Chief Mission Officer and the founder of Brands on a Mission. Give her a round of applause. Thank you all for being here. And Eliane, I want to start with you if I can. To provide some context, can you give the audience a sense of why dry land ecosystems are so important? I think that there's a misconception that they're just dry lands.
Mm-hmm. Before I start, how many of you know you're working in dry lands? 1, 2 people. Whoa, 3. Okay. So most of you may be operating in dry lands, but you actually don't know it. And you just don't call them that way. It could be the sesame in your food products, the cotton in your supply chain, the gum arabic in your drinks, the fiber or cashmere in your fashion. Much of it originates in landscapes that are drying out, degrading, and underinvested. This is your exposure. It is also a great opportunity, and we're looking forward to sharing more about that.
So much opportunity there, right? Yeah, we'll talk about it in a minute. Kaushik, how is the climate crisis, in terms of opportunity, bringing more awareness to dry lands?
Yeah, India is home to 100 million smallholder farmers, and for most of those farmers, dry land is a way of life, not a word, or a concept, right? And it always was that every year you waited for the one season of rain for one crop that you could grow, and if you were lucky, you got the money and invested in a bore well, or a tube well to get some water. But those started drying up as well. So I think today, for most of the farmers we work with who are women, climate change, what it has done is made that word dry much more real. Every year, whether it's one crop or actually only 1 acre of your land that has one crop that you can grow because of the rains, or maybe it's you leave it fallow for 2 years so that the water gets recharged and then you start growing again. So that's the reality that climate change has caused. It's accelerated what already existed.
Sure, thank you for that. Helmi, you and I have been talking for many years about how biodynamic agriculture is a way to build resilience on dry lands, especially in Egypt where you live. Can you talk a little bit about that and why it's so important?
I mean, Egypt, many of you know it, 96% desert, small green stripe, the Nile. Mainly no rain, so everything is dry beside this small piece. And this small piece is getting built on by the 120 million Egyptians, which were 7 million 100 years ago. So you can imagine the land is closing down, and then we have only the desert remaining. So desert is our destiny. Huh? What to do, how to reclaim, how to work in the dry land, how to create livelihoods, how to feed the population, and how to use water in a meaningful way, and in the same time allow people to strive, develop themselves. And we are working on this project since 49 years in the desert, and we have proven that biodynamic farming is capable of reclaiming desert. Obviously, biodynamic farming, together with agroforestry, together with the right variety, indigenous knowledge, and a lot of things to make it really people-centered, to not forget what it's all about. It's not about the nature, it's not about the dry land, it's about people, livelihoods, healthy food, and doing all this and using water carefully, increasing biodiversity, and mitigating climate change or adapting to climate change. This is what Sechem is all about since 49 years, and we have shown it's possible. And in the last 3 years, we were able to upscale this to 40,000 farmers in Egypt, aiming for the 7 million, of course, because this 7 million farmers in the future will have to do the same thing.
So desert is our destiny for sure, but it can be people-centered and an opportunity, as Eliane said earlier. Marianne, private sector investment is so important to this. Are you seeing examples of brands supporting dryland agriculture and dryland communities?
I think, I'm not seeing enough, that's for sure.
Sure.
I think many of them sometimes source may not even fully know that it's coming. But I think what we've heard already is that once you see and experience the potential of what drylands can do and how you can turn them into thriveland, it's impossible for you to unsee it. So I'd really like to start from that perspective. So bring the visibility right up front, right? From the cashew nuts, from obviously the gum arabica that we've discussed, the fabulous mangoes that might be growing in some of the countries. So for me, having spent most of my career looking at the intersection of marketing, public health, and working with some of the biggest brands out there, you start thinking and you say, okay, so what is it that these brands can do in order to put this at the center of where they're actually sourcing? And the reality is, it's very personal for me because you are from Egypt, I'm from Mali, I grew up in Timbuktu, so talk about 100% dry land. We were at 96, we've moved to 100%, right? Yeah. And yet we have some of the most, delicious mangoes. We still grow millet, fonio. You go to Whole Foods and you pay 23 pounds for a bag of fonio that I have twice a week on a regular basis. And I think about this and you say, well, yes, they are already putting some of these important commodities and we're using them very regularly. However, are they priced the right way? Do they give us the kind of value addition that we want to give back to the places of the landscape where they're grown and where we are learning to thrive? So it's about moving from dry lands to thrivelands and owning the fact that we've learned how to survive and how to really be, to thrive in this context. Yeah. So I think for me, that's a little bit about where we are, but most of the brands would have used already some drylands commodities.
Yeah, absolutely.
40% of the planet.
And I love that line, moving dry lands into thrive lands. And so Eliane and Kaushik, obviously farmers need investment to be thrive lands. Can we talk a little bit about what that investment looks like? Maybe.
So one of the things that's really key is that you may not realize, but 40% of the Earth's surface is in the dryland area. And it supports nearly 3 billion people that produce 44% of global food, hold over 50% of the world's livestock, and store 30% of land carbon mass. And so one of the things that's really important to understand is they're fast degrading, but at the same time, they're places of deep opportunity. The UN estimates that 12 million hectares are lost annually, costing us 42 billion in earnings each year. So that's the business opportunity. Meanwhile, for every dollar that we invest in drylands, we get $30 back. So the opportunity in terms of the investment and the returns are really great. So the bottom line, there is no resilient supply chain without a resilient landscapes. So how we invest in these spaces becomes critical, not only to building future prosperity, but also having a more resilient planet.
Absolutely. Bravo. Kaushik.
Right, yeah. So trying to make this a little bit real. So let me give an example of a farmer that we work with. So, we work in Rajasthan, which is also largely a desert state in India. And one of our farmers, Anchi Devi, owns about 2 acres of land. And again, 85% of Indian farmers own less than a hectare of land. And, about 15, 20 years ago, even though it's closer to a desert, they used to use all of their land. They used to work on 2 seasons a year because they had some access to rainfall, but also some dryland crops that they could grow even without a lot of rainfall. But over the last 5 years, that sort of even diversified approach has become very, very narrow. So now, because the rainfalls don't come on time, the groundwater is dried up, and they don't have enough water to use the whole land, Anchi Devi and her family use only, let's say, half an acre of land to grow 1 crop. And on average, from agriculture, just earn $500 a year. So they go out, they work in other farms, they work in the city. So it's sort of the reality that's there. So if you really wanted to rejuvenate that, right, the investment that's required is, and we were talking about this in the morning in another panel, is a portfolio approach. It's not one thing. It is, you have to have multiple things to really bring that family back into the middle, into at least sustenance and then with the middle class. But the way we approach it is that we take the view of technology, and especially farm technologies that are taken for granted in, let's say, Israel or, or Europe or Netherlands, which have both three things in place: high yield, sustainability, and climate resilience, and say, how do we make them work for the poorest farmers? And our flagship product is called the Greenhouse in a Box. It's a low-cost greenhouse, 80% cheaper, that that helps farmers like Anchi double their incomes while using 90% lesser water and having 60% lesser crop losses. And the investment for that is not a lot compared to a lot of things that we do. It's about $500 per farmer, but it's still a lot. But because what that $500 does is that Anchi Devi's family in the last 2 years has earned $2,000 from just that $500 investment, right? But that investment they can't make. It has to be done through a combination of policy, business, and I would say philanthropy. So so just $500 could really change that situation. And if you take a portfolio approach and add a few more things, you can make them resilient for the long term.
That's great. Thank you. On sort of that point, that investment point, Helmi, carbon credits have been such an important part of the work you're doing with farmers. Can you talk about, that ROI that they're getting?
I mean, I attended all the sessions, all your beautiful sessions today, and I was thinking all the time that we were speaking about sustainable agriculture, regenerative agriculture, organic agriculture, biodynamic agriculture, knowing that in the whole world, this small niche is 2%. In some countries of Europe, it's 6, 10, but this is the maximum. Huh? What's the reason? Huh? Everyone speaks about it, everyone loves it, everyone would consume it if available, but nobody wants to buy it. And the reason is it's more expensive. It's very easy. And Adam Smith is very strong in our bloodstreams and tells us the cheap things are the real great things. So it's more expensive, but this is not true. And there is one step we have to do in our consciousness evolution in the next few years if we want to change this paradigm. Organic, biodynamic is cheaper. And it's only by hiding and externalizing costs that it seems to be more expensive. And FAO nowadays, not only the fundamentalists like myself are saying this. So now it's the question, how can this be shown on the shelf? The problem is this would need very courageous actions for politicians, which most probably will not come. And we as civil society and social entrepreneurs have to move ahead. And to bridge the situation, ecosystem service payments is the only way. This does not mean I'm very keen on carbon credits or on biodiversity credits or on water credits, but I think for a certain time, until the consumer is ready to pay the just price, we need this to get the prices down. In Egypt, the 40,000 farmers are able every day to sell biodynamic products at conventional price because they get their premium in ecosystem service payments. And they have a better income, better livelihood for them and their families. They feed organic, biodynamic, healthy food, and they sequester millions of tons of carbon. So a win-win-win overall. And I think ecosystem service payments is a lever for system change we should explore.
Absolutely. Sort of on a related point, Miriam, you've talked about holistic procurement has to be a part of this. So companies really thinking holistically about where they're getting their products from and then paying for them. Can you talk about why, from your perspective, why that's so important?
Yeah, to be honest, I keep talking about the importance, my 3 V's, and I keep talking about these 3 V's because I think the first one, and Dorothy mentioned a bit of this, is obviously the visibility that we're going to give. The story that we actually tell about where these commodities come from, right? Where the moringas come from, where the fonioas come from, any ingredients that have actually come from the dry lands, soon to be thrive lands, and what's that conversation around, right? Because, the more we tell our consumers and the more we understand where they're coming from, the better it will be in terms of investment. And that takes me to my second V, which is very much around the viability of the investment.
Right.
Because if the procurement intends to buy, they need a secure source, of actually ensuring that indeed they're going to be able to repeatedly buy their mint from UP, that they're going to be able to get the right mangoes at the right place to be able to make sure that their shelf shelves are not empty, and at the same time that in that conversations around viability, that the farmers are not moving away from this landscape, and how do we account that into the conversations for the viability of de-risking buying from the landscape and therefore also building the landscape. And I think for me, my last V at any point is the value creation, addition, that capture that you actually need to get from this landscape. And that also comes back to, obviously all of us learning from the communities and the humans, the resilient humans that are actually making it work in those landscapes. Because you cannot separate resilience of landscape from resilience of human, because they come together. Yeah. So much learning coming from a pastoralist community. I'm Fulani by background, and you already know how to work your field with that. I don't particularly, but I've seen it. Just saying. I don't want to overclaim what I'm not, but I just think there's a lot to learn here. And when you come in with a more equitable partnership where you see the learnings and you share that across, then I think, like you say, it's been hundreds of years that those dry lands have actually been used. And is there an opportunity for us to really see that as an opportunity to create more value, to capture more value, but to also give back more value, so that, if you're selling fonio at 20 pounds in Whole Foods, that the person who's producing the fonio is getting the fair price.
Exactly.
Right? In a country where the fonio is produced.
Exactly. Thank you.
Just a conversation
Thank you so much. Eliane, I want to end with you in the last minute and 20 seconds that we have left. And, a message to policymakers about dry lands and why they're important.
So I think, again, we know that they're responsible for the livelihoods of 3 billion people on the planet. And so one of the things, I'm a member of the UN independent group of scientists looking at producing the 2027 report on the SDGs. And one of the key things is we know by 2030, we're not going to get where we wanted for all the SDGs. So we're already looking beyond 2030. However, we all have an opportunity to accelerate with enabling policy, with enabling investment, with enabling storytelling, with enabling work with the farmers and the value chains to really start making that difference. And so this is an opportunity for all of us. And for policymakers, at the end of the day, what we want is more taxpayer money. We want votes. So how not to be involved in taking these dry lands and making them prosperous, and so that these thrive lands are not only a source of prosperity, but also a source of peace.
Wonderful point to end on. Thank you so much. Give this panel a round of applause. Thank you. Thank you all, everyone. In this next conversation, which is in partnership with the Alliance for Biodiversity International and CIAT, we're going to continue to talk about how researchers and businesses can help us create resilience for the future by building back biodiversity alongside farmers. So joining us, we have Marcela Quintero, the Associate Director for General Research for Research Strategy and Innovation at the Alliance of Biodiversity International and CIAT. Welcome. Give her a round of applause, everyone. Stephanie Speck is the Global Director of Strategic Partnerships, Engagement, and Communication at the Alliance of Biodiversity International and CIAT. Give her a round of applause. Matthew Hewitt is the Sustainable Capital Markets Team Director at BNP Paribas. Round of applause. And Chris O'Damo is the Head of Global Sustainability Impact and B Corp for Danone. Round of applause for Chris. So Marcela, if I can start with you, when you meet with businesses, I'm wondering what the pitch is. Why do you want them to care about biodiversity?
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Sure. So actually, we were today in another panel where we said we are a research organization working in agriculture and food systems, and we just refresh our strategy where we said we want to bring science into investment and not only funding into science. So how we make this in the other way. So when it is about biodiversity and agriculture and food systems, what we are talking and working together already with private sector is how we unleash agrobiodiversity, for example, crop diversity, genetic diversity, to create agricultural systems that are more resilient, But at the same time, that open new opportunities for farmers, but also for the private sector that are working with farmers. So that's the starting point.
Take a step back from me and tell me what how biodiversity loss is already impacting the private sector.
Yeah, if you see, basically, I'm going to bring an example. There are millions of investment in bananas in Latin America, currently being affected by Fusarium, that is a fungus that is affecting the banana plantations. It's not only private sector from Latin America, but from abroad. The issue is that Fusarium is spreading so quickly, and the banana production is relying in only one commercial variety. We did not advance or take full advantage of the full diversity of banana that we have in our bank, in our seed banks. So now we are working in platform with the private sector to see how we can unlock funding to look into this other agrobiodiversity or genetic diversity that we have with bananas, to see if we have there the solution and a resistant material to Fusarium. So basically, it's a matter of reducing the risk and how biodiversity we can make we can de-risk some of the agricultural businesses.
Yeah, thank you for that. Matthew, let me turn to you. You recently reached out to investors in your network to understand what they're looking for, and I'd love to hear some of the insights.
Yeah, sure. I think what was particularly interesting, we weren't really sure when we reached out to investors and said, what do you want to see from global corporates? We're talking the food retailers, food producers, and ultimately the full supply chain. What do you want to see? And I didn't really know what they were going to come back with, because what we were being told was by corporates. We don't know what people want. We're getting different messages. But one thing that was really consistent, deforestation. The other thing that was really, really consistent was traceability. And obviously that's all connected. And if you can't prove that full traceability through the line we've heard today, it's really hard for those big investors to actually invest in a global corporate. And it's very hard for them to then buy through the supply chain.
Yeah.
So that goes all the way down to the individual farmer. So even if you don't think you need to be showing traceability, fundamentally someone along your supply chain needs to see it. And that was the most interesting takeaway.
Yeah, and I don't feel like you would have heard that a few years ago even.
No, and I think one thing that's really come out is the EU deforestation regulation, which is coming into place at the end of this year. But anyone who can say that they meet it already, you're already in a much better position. So the more that you can, even though we're outside of the EU where we sit here, and obviously across most of the world, fundamentally, it is going to be a major factor for global food chain.
Absolutely. So Chris and Stephanie, I want you both to sort of attack the partnership sort of question on different levels. So one, Chris, what role do partnerships play in implementing sustainability initiatives at the farm level? And then Stephanie, how can brands help accelerate climate action when we're talking about partnerships? So Chris, go first.
Yep. Oh, I have one. There we go. Couple ways to think about this. So partnerships, which I'll be the first one to admit that word gets used a lot in these conversations. It's really broad. It shows up in different ways. Let me be super concrete about this and give you a couple examples. So we have, and speaking of biodiversity, and it's really about risk for us, right? And if I think about our direct supply chain, the number one commodity we have that's important to Danone is dairy. 60,000 dairy farmers across the world supplying us milk in about 20 countries. It's a massive network of farms. We are doing many different strategies to engage directly with them. So we're not just a buyer, but we're a partner with them. We are thinking about their financial livelihoods. We're thinking about their regenerative practices, which can build resilience. We're thinking about the nutrition of the cow to get better yields to the animal. All of this is a very systematic approach that's good for the business and hopefully good for the farms if we're successful at the end of the day. So how do we do that? It is truly systems building at the local level, and every country and every network or population of these farms is going to require slightly different things, right? So if it's a farm in the United States or a farm in France or a farm in Morocco, dairy farming is dairy farming, but they have some slightly different needs. So let me go to Morocco, where it's a really interesting example of agriculture, and we just heard about drylands earlier. I mean, it is a very relatively dry system there, and we have 30,000 smallholders selling us milk. It's actually the third largest volume of milk by a country in the world for us. It's a huge dairy culture, super important market for Danone. These are smallholders with 5, 10 cows. So what do they need? They need a lot of different things. They need access to capital. They need training, technical assistance providing, knowledge conveyance. They need help with quality of the milk. We've been building milk collection centers for communities so that small farm holders can come there. They own it. It's like a mini, it's not a true cooperative, but it's like a cooperative where they're running it themselves by these communities. So that's one partnership with these communities. Like, how do we get there and help them organize? What does a good milk collective look like? And how is it run well? Giving them the administrative or business capabilities to actually run that well. That's taken off really well. It's expensive, it takes time, but you have to have that relationship with the community for us to have that continuity of supply, but also so that these smallholders can stay in business, literally. Another example is using partners like development agencies or NGOs on the ground for that technical service provider. We have a lot of experts in the company, but we don't have hundreds of people on the ground. So using a GIZ in Morocco, for example, where they can help build this technical assistance capacity. It's capacity building of human beings that need to go far beyond Danone as a company and have the right kind of technical service for those farms. We're doing this more and more in other countries, whether it's India, whether it's Brazil. We've had a fantastic program built up over the last 5 years with the government, with local technical assistance providers. It's that magic formula that's not so magic, it's very fundamental of good credit, financial incentives, technical service, and infrastructure. And sometimes we have to go in and really build those things out.
And culturally and community relevant. I mean, I think that's what you're really doing. Stephanie.
I've spent the last 3 years before moving to the Alliance working for the world's largest multilateral climate investor. And when this current US government was elected, people still came to us for our money, but didn't want to talk about climate. So I think the first thing that brands need to do is just have the conversation. We know the statistics point to the fact that 89% of people want to talk about climate, but 67% of them believe that no one else does. So please, just start talking about climate and talk about it accurately. These issues of nature, climate, biodiversity, food systems, they're all related, but they're all slightly differently. And move beyond talking about it and the PR and the CSR work that comes along with that into the competitive and commercial advantage that linking with issues, and not just linking with issues, but solving some of these fundamental inputs into climate change bring. For the Alliance, we are really interested in partnerships, and we have a lot of partners, but we are interested in partnerships that with companies who are moving beyond thinking about competing around efficiency, which is a big deal in the agri-food sector, who are thinking about optimizing systems for fragility. So efficiency is really a liability when you have massive climate shocks, if you have pest outbreaks and disease outbreaks, as Marcella was talking about, and supply disruptions hit, and they will. So we're moving from thinking of working with people who think that efficiency is king to people who think that actually the winning part of this commercial equation is biodiversity is a source of competitive advantage because you can access novel ingredients. 70% of the world's food supply at the moment comes from 9 crops. If that is not a recipe for disaster, and if you are sitting with any hedge fund investor in a room, they will tell you never ever go for that deal. The risk portfolio is not diversified enough. We invest in it. Every time we go to the supermarket, every company we deal with that insists on dealing only with cereal crops. So look at competitive advantage. Stabilizing supply chains. You know that cacao, the whole world's cacao supply, well, 75% of that comes from 2 countries. And in 6 years' time, Côte d'Ivoire, which grows almost 50% of that, will not have the land available due to climate change. So good luck, people dealing with cacao. And opening premium markets. Even countries like Somalia, 25 years of government instability, no government, ran the world's largest live cattle trading export through war. We've got to look in unexpected places, see biodiversity as a competitive advantage, and be the first movers. And companies, if you're thinking it's a nice bottom line on a PR report, you're behind the 8 ball, because we're dealing with partners from NGOs, from investors and private sector who are there with us looking at biodiversity as a source of resilience for their business needs.
Thank you. That all sounds great. You're speaking to a room of enlightened companies and investors and people who wanted to be here. And biodiversity as a source of competitive advantage sounds great to me. But I think this, and this is a question for all of you, I don't know how we convince companies who are outside of this room to think that way. And then what will distinguish the food companies that thrive from those that are not going to, that are going to struggle in the coming decade. And I just want to be really real here. And maybe, Matthew, I turn to you first.
Yeah, I mean, I've already mentioned traceability, so I won't focus on that too much. But I think one of the things, the collaboration that we've heard about, obviously in the room, there's a lot of collaboration. But I think one thing I draw everyone's attention to is the update in the last day or so from the Regenerative Together program, and I think that could be really game changing. To me, it feels like an inflection point, and obviously a key part of regenerative agriculture is around ensuring that we're focused on biodiversity, but everyone doing the same thing and kind of focusing on moving together. And if you see who's committed to it, Danone obviously, and many others, it really is, if you're not part of that kind of moving together, you're going to be left behind, and you'll struggle to get financing.
Can I give a really concrete example?
Yes, please.
On that. So this goes back to the cacao market and the traceability, the European regulations, and not just cacao market. But we're currently aware, because we have a platform that looks at satellite data, on-ground verification, and how intercropping is used in parts of West Africa. We know that there's about $45 million worth of potential exports from 3 critical West African countries into the European market that are wrongly labelled at the moment. And that's where the partnership with science comes in really, really handy. That's where science opens up doors for businesses to not just do the right thing, but make the right commercial decisions based on the evidence that might otherwise be very difficult to find.
Thank you. Chris, I want to turn to you and then back to Marcella.
Yeah, let me paint a picture of another risk that's it is a competitive advantage, but it's going to be a very difficult one to obtain. It's around water and it's around our factories. So we have these factories, which are massive investments, over 120 around the world. About 55 of those watersheds are at risk. And that's by our science, that's by our analysis. There's water quality, water quantity issues, and we're one player in these watersheds, in most of these watersheds. There's a multitude of other players. So this is even more challenging than the 60,000 farmer equation that I laid out, because we can do really good activities, and we are doing this. We're doing it in France, we're doing it in Spain, Indonesia, Mexico. We're investing in nature-based solutions because it's helping minimize that risk upstream from us from these factories. We can reforest with a partner on the ground, an NGO that tells us the science is here, multi-stakeholder groups that have already mapped out the watershed where these projects should go. But if we're one of the few that are investing, then the watershed health can still be going down.
Yeah.
So how do we mobilize with governments, with these multi-stakeholder groups to bring more water users to the table? Frankly, my view on this is that we need government in a perfect world, some form or fashion. It can be local government. It doesn't have to be the national parliament or Congress doing this work. And oftentimes that's what it is. It's a regional government. It's a local. People are upset. People are concerned about what's happening around them. They build these water councils, watership leadership. They have many, many names.
Yeah.
And then we voluntarily show up. Sometimes we're told to show up, but we need more. And we see these work. We see it work in Mexico. We see it work in Indonesia. Where it works better is where there's a strong government force to compel others to participate.
That municipal leadership and empowerment is great. Marcella.
Yeah, no, I would like also to call the attention when we are working with private sector is that doing an action that is related to biodiversity is not only about preserving the natural ecosystems surrounding the operation, etc. But, for example, if we are talking about improving grasses in dairy sector, this is about investing in biodiversity, how we unlock the diversity of the diverse grasses that we have to put different options that then can produce and increase the productivity in the dairy sector, just to give you an example. Or I also hear many private sectors saying we need to find an alternative to synthetic fertilizers because it's a risk, right? And then why we don't work on, or they want to see if there is something on biologicals to improve soil fertility. This is also working with biodiversity. Right. So the option, and I think this is something we have to do better, is to see that biodiversity is in many things, in many parts of the businesses of the private sector, and it's not only about restoring land, which is good, or also conserving the nature, but in the operation itself, there are many biodiversity components that can help to make the system and the operation better.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about infrastructure earlier and different kinds of infrastructure, and biodiversity needs to be considered infrastructure for companies to thrive, for farmers to thrive. Marcella, because we only have about a minute and a half left, I want to leave you with the sort of final word on a call to action to this audience. Again, you're talking to brands, you're talking to the funding and donor communities, you're talking to insurance companies. What do you want them to take away from this conversation?
I think not all this one, but I think today has been the day of the private sector and finance to build resilience. I think we need to find a space not only to discuss the idea, but to have action platforms. Definitely. We have already many ideas on how to measure, to provide indicators, to be able to improve private businesses. We also have shown examples of how we are supporting investments to show the performance in sustainability. At the same time, we have a very enthusiastic private sector wanting to be more sustainable, more resilient. But there are it's case by case, right?
Yeah.
I think how we become this as a platform of action. There are many coalitions also emerging, and I think this is the biggest challenge that you have, is how we link these different coalitions into actions.
Right.
Yesterday, last night with you, in the Voice of Farmers, at the end of the day, we said, if what we do, how we know if we are success, if all of these actions that we are talking together translate into real benefit for them.
Absolutely. It has to be benefits for farmers at the end of the day. Thank you all so much. Great panel. Nice to see you all. Thank you. All right, so as you heard earlier, technology is something that's being leveraged in really exciting ways, as we all know, to strengthen supply chains and improve transparency and traceability, to empower farmers, so important, as well as food businesses and eaters. In this next session, we're going to talk about how advancements in AI are making this work easier and helping to build climate resilience. So please join me in welcoming Pierre Poulanes, the CEO of Pictera, to the stage to have a fireside chat. Nice to see you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Danielle.
I'd love to start with an origin story because everyone has one. How did you come into sort of combining agriculture and technology in your work?
Wow, that's a that's a big question, but let me start still with a story.
Please.
A real life story that happened 6 months ago in December, where a series of natural disasters hit Indonesia, and one of our customers back in Switzerland, a global famous coffee brand, actually the sourcing team, they wanted to use our GeoAI engine to understand how badly their farms, something about 5,000 farms, have been damaged by this hurricane. So they use our system, they get the assessment done in a very short period of time, so they get the answer. But the thing is that at some point, the sourcing team, they had to collaborate with the sustainability team. Because the sustainability team, they were owning the, for the one who have been exposed to EDR, they were owning the polygons, the GPS location of the farm. And someone at the sustainability team, at some point, asked our system, but okay, we did invest in region ag or in agroforestry in this region of Indonesia for the last 10 years, so what happened to these farms? And this person, just out of curiosity, asked our system, but what happened to this farm? And we did realize that the farm that have implemented agroforestry have suffered 40% less damages than traditional farms. And it was an eye opener for everyone.
Right.
So finally, like the sourcing team, they were like, okay, so what you are doing is actually paying off in terms of financial return, because we could put a price tag on what have been saved. And for the sustainability team, they were like, hey, you see, the investments pay off.
Yeah.
So it was a bit of a surprise for everyone.
Yeah, like an aha moment for sure.
Exactly, and actually that's the reason why we exist.
Yeah.
We don't want people to be surprised anymore.
Right.
That natural positive system can actually outperform traditional systems.
Yeah. And I think, the way you're thinking about things is that data collected from farmers should not just be a one-way street to a company. And I want to know how Pictera is leveraging data from research organizations like, the Alliance for Biodiversity and SIA to help farmers restore ecosystems and then adapt to what's happening with climate extremes.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me rewind a bit and put things in context. So we've been here for the last 10 years, so we observe a certain pattern happening across the industry. And one of these patterns, it's very simplistic, but one of these patterns has been to consider sustainability initiatives, investments, or topics as almost standalone project or program that are not really interconnected to each other. And getting to your point, for every sustainability project, program that you have, you can also add to it like a tool or a different system. So it creates a lot of complexity, also frustration from the team because you need to navigate between different systems and tools. Beside, of course, creating overheads and whatever. So it's a very inefficient system. And while we are actually leveraging on public data, and I also need to mention here the Data Forest partnership that has been enabled by Google, is to kind of switch the paradigm. Say, okay, you don't need a tool for biodiversity, you don't need a tool for carbon, you don't need a tool for deforestation. You need a foundational layer of data that is shared across things. And that's why actually Google and the sustainable sourcing team is achieving. FAO is also working toward that direction, is to kind of say, well, we need to share, and someone from Aldi earlier said that, okay, that's the industry should share this because this is not how you're going to differentiate yourself from your competitors. It's not the way you create value.
It can't be competitive. In this final minute we have left, I'm so sorry, we're running out of time. Call to action for this audience on what you want them to do when they're thinking about data, when they're thinking about that collaboration that's needed, when they're thinking about not competing with one another when we're talking about sustainability or the survival and thriving of farmers across the world.
So definitely the technology is there to approach things a bit differently and to not oppose or not to say like sustainability is a cost driver. Definitely sustainability, nature, positive system can deliver value in terms of crop protection, yield, resilience, but also create value for the brand.
Right.
So the technology is there to kind of change the paradigm and initiate new things. And maybe in few years from now, this today won't be called like sustainability because sustainability will be part of our operating model.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Pierre. This is
Thank you,
great. Really nice to meet you. Thank you. Give him a round of applause. We have one more panel, and I want to make sure that you stay with us for the reception. It's going to be really delicious, so please don't leave. But first, I'm excited to dive into this final conversation on lessons from the hospitality sector to understand sustainable practices they're putting in place while also growing their businesses. We have Caitlin Liebert, who is the Global Head of Sustainability for Amazon Worldwide Grocery. Give her a round of applause. Kevin Watson is the Sustainability Director at Levy UK. Round of applause. Clemens Laudren is the Vice President of Global Food and Beverage for Premium, Mid-Scale, and Economy Brands at Accor. And Holly Lech is the Head of Sustainability at JKS Restaurants. Thank you all for being here. Round of applause. All right. So, Kevin, I think I'm going to start with you. And start with some myth busting. If you're the only dude here, so I'm gonna start with you first. There's this myth that companies can't grow while advancing sustainability.
Yeah.
But it's not true.
I know we've kind of broke the mold there. Levy, we're part of Compass Group, so we're the foods, sports, leisure, hospitality sector. We feed about 20 million people a year, and that doing things like Wimbledon, Twickenham, Tottenham, so on and so forth. But we have had, I've been Sustainability Director from 2022. I come from an ops background, so I don't come from a traditional sustainability background, with a remit to kind of really make and put some purpose into the business. So since 2022 through to, we just published our first impact report in September last year with the help of my friends from Foodsteps down here to really validate those numbers where we thought, we do think we've seen a reduction of 30% across our scope 3. And just to kind of clarify, 99% of our emissions come from our scope 3 because we don't own buildings. Like the food you tasted here, for example, today is part of Compass Food ecosystem. But whilst we've done that 30% within Levy, we also grew our business by 65%. So we're really proud of that. We've kind of continued to grow. But I think, genuinely, it's like, I had a call yesterday actually where somebody from one of the big brewers was saying to me that sustainability isn't really a commercial lever, and I'm kind of saying That's absolutely not true. It absolutely is a commercial lever. You know, sustainability is the reason and purpose why companies and partners want to come and work with us, because we can be very clear and defined about our reduction plan, our strategy across people and planet through environmental, nature and health levers. And that's why people want to come to work with us, and we can clearly demonstrate that now, Daniela.
Yeah, you've created that momentum. And Holly, on that point, on Kevin's point, you know, when you're talking about making businesses more efficient through sustainability, how do you harness that energy and really bring people on board so that it's embedded in the company?
Totally. So actually similarly to Kevin, I also started in this role in 2022. So the entirety of my role has been in the context of increasing costs and a lot of geopolitical instability. Energy has always been front of mind, thinking about our efficiency, thinking about waste as well. And I just think, you know, sustainability as a word, as a topic, has a lot of myths surrounding it. People always think it's going to be more expensive and it's going to make your life more challenging. So actually breaking down those myths and showing that we can, sustainability can be commercially, drive commercial success, but also that it actually can make systems more efficient, has been such a great way to kind of get buy-in from some of the skeptics. But also it's been an incredible way to kind of get our line level and teams engaged with that kind of impact piece, where they really feel like they're working for a business who has good values and is putting money where their mouth is.
Yeah, I love this myth busting. Thank you for that. Clemens, procurement has to be such a huge part of building resilience. Can you talk about how, you know, when we're procuring food the right way, it makes everything more resilient?
Yeah, of course. So at Accor, we have around 6,000 hotels, 10,000 restaurants and bars. So our business is global, and we have some countries where it's easier to have sustainable sourcing, and typically EU is one of them. But we also operate in other countries where the sustainable supply chain is not there yet. And so we are working a lot with regulators, with politicians, and with the supply chain to make sure that together we can grow the demand to make sure that, for instance, our commitment on supplying only cage-free eggs in our hotels can be achieved in all the countries of the world, which today is difficult in certain parts of the world because there is no cage-free eggs in some countries where we operate. So this is indeed something that we are really looking at.
Yeah, thank you. It's powerful. Caitlin, all day we've been hearing about the cost savings, the value of implementing sustainability, but those cost savings need to go somewhere that's not just into a company's profit. It needs to be reinvested. You're a strong proponent of that.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the things that I've tried to do in my career with this is around thinking of sustainability more holistically from a P&L standpoint. I think there's some really quick wins that we talk about, particularly within hospitality or retail, where you can really quickly, particularly around operations, save some money. You can, energy efficiency, there's some quick wins that you can really put some money in the bank. But I challenge us not to stop there. I think it's really sort of easy to stop there and become maybe known as a cost savings center, which I think we all, from a business standpoint, appreciate that. But I challenge us to think about a portfolio-wide sustainability program where we're taking some of those earnings and then we're reinvesting them in the things that do cost. Some of the things within sustainability, particularly when we're talking about food and agriculture, take investment. And it doesn't mean there's no NPV or ROI. It just means it's maybe on a different timeline. And so we heard today about some of those things where we need to shift the model slightly. And so how do we think of our entire portfolio more as a operating P&L versus a cost saving center or a cost center?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I want to come back to something that we talked about earlier in the day, which is food loss and food waste. And this is really for all of you. There's an easy connection to make between cutting food loss and waste and cutting costs. But how do you make the case for sustainability when the long-term benefits they won't be seen for a long time? They're long-term benefits. How do you still make that case when you're not going to see them right away?
Yeah, I think particularly in hospitality, and before I was with Whole Foods and Amazon, I was the head of sustainability for Chipotle for over a decade. And one of the things about hospitality is it can be really transactional. It can be really sort of a transaction between a guest and our operations teams. And so how do we invest in storytelling in a way that helps move this interaction from transactional to potentially transformative? And I think, again, the practitioners in this room know, like, the marketing of our efforts is a fine line. Sometimes it can feel between greenwashing and doing really, really meaningful storytelling. And so I just want to acknowledge that. It can be challenging to articulate these things in a way that brings, transformative, inspirational thought. But I'm a big proponent of not just making sure we're doing the really, really, really important, rigorous work and investing, but then also storytelling to ensure that we can have some of these transactional moments turn into something a little more transformative.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone else want to comment on food loss and food waste and storytelling?
Yeah, I think it is important. I'm a great believer in is education of what you do is what changes the culture of your business. We globally have about 250,000 employees. In the UK for Levy alone, we have 33,000 employees. We're the biggest single hospitality provider in the UK. So that education is really key about making that switch. And it's a wider compass global initiative, but we're in the 10th year of our Stop Food Waste Day campaign. And that's something that I see it coming to life every year across the whole business. And, for a business that serves, over 5 billion, that shocks me every time you say it, meals per year in our full ecosystem, then those educational pieces and drives really make massive impact overall. And you see all the outputs of it and how they get posted and how teams challenge each other. So I think, it is really important to focus on it, but plus tell the story around about it also.
And I think that this story also goes to several audiences, because you have your guests, but at least for Accor, you also have the teams, you also have the owners of the hotels. And everyone gets a different story that, of course, is connected. But for us, food waste, honestly, is the easiest one, because no one wants to throw food away. Owners see that, when we started measuring the food waste per cover, we were at 300 grams per cover. When now we are at 150, and we are targeting to reduce further. By 2030, it's 120 grams per cover. So it's a huge ambition, but actually just starting to measure and showing, okay, well, you see, you're losing 300 grams of produce every time you're serving a customer. This hits everyone, even our guests. And when we put these little stickers saying, okay, well, take what you can eat, or beware, we are saving food here, we need to make it playful, fun, and enticing, because we are not here to be patronizing. It's not our role, and people that are staying with us, they are either on business or leisure, but we don't want to kill the holidays by spoiling the fun. So it's really finding the balance between making sure that everyone gets the impact, yet staying light and positive about it.
That's great. And I love the point about not shaming people. On that point, Holly, how do we make this fun and playful, as Clement said, and not something that people are like, oh, I feel really bad, I'm going to do it anyway?
Yeah, definitely. I think, hospitality's superpower is bringing people together, and I come from a background of premium restaurants, JKS restaurants. We've got 20 restaurants in London, 8 Michelin stars within the group. And so that storytelling piece is so important, and that doesn't start when the guest walks through the door. That starts with the website, the menu. So many people will check out a menu before they go and dine in that restaurant. And I think
very much guilty of that.
Yeah, I love it. And I think being able to sow threads of storytelling, they don't need to be explicit. It can be like dropping in, provenance or ingredients or details of how things are farmed or caught. That can start from the very beginning, but then our superpower is having our teams empowered with the knowledge to then relay that to guests who are interested. Most guests don't come to a Michelin-starred restaurant to be preached at about where things are coming from, but there are a handful of guests who ask that question, and if we are able to really tell that story passionately, then amazing. that's incredible. And your experience, you know, is so heightened. And I think, you know, you're always going to remember the restaurants you had bad service at. And I think if we can do a really good job to make sure that service is impeccable and tell brilliant stories, then those are the restaurants that are really going to stand out.
Telling brilliant stories, telling true stories, so important. For this final sort of minute and a half we have left, I'd love to, you know, what I've been doing all day, a call to action from each of you for this audience and for those listening online. So maybe I'll go with you first.
I would say be intentional about where you dine. I'm sure many people here have flown in, traveled to London, and will be spending the week dining out at various institutions and restaurants, cafes and bars, etc., etc. But be intentional about where your money goes, because it really does matter. And I think there's some incredible restaurants, you know, I speak for London, who are doing great things, who are really working so closely with suppliers and with farmers, paying them, you know, a good price for really good produce. That's such an amazing way to support an industry who's also having a bit of a tough time at the moment.
Absolutely. Thank you, Clemens.
I would elaborate on two other participants, Ellen saying keep talking, and I think it was Daniela saying keep it simple. I'm not a CSR person. I feel like a bit of an intruder here, but I'm really happy to be here. I'm really focused on F&B, and it's too complicated. I don't know what to prioritize. For instance, is it better to have an organic carrot, or is it better to have a local carrot? I have no idea. I need this information. When we talk about food waste, for me, it was really about not wasting the resources. And I learned yesterday about all the methane production. I had no idea about this one. So really, please keep talking, keep explaining to us, because it's really hard to make the right decision, even with good intentions and with wish to make progress. It's not easy to know what has the most impact and what is the best in terms of preserving the planet.
Thank you so much, Clemens. Kevin?
Similar vein, I think it's a collaboration. You know, it's like, it sounds cliche, but like, you know, we have to harness the power of weeks like this. You know, it started with TikTok on Monday for me in the Conduit. You know, went through, ended up at a seafood dinner with like 3 PhD specialists understanding like British aqua shellfish, you know, that went on to then about food resilience, kind of then coming through. And the amount of connections I've made this week have been amazing. You know, it's like making sure that you harness the power of that. I've already got 5 or 6 meetings set up in the next 3, 4, 5 weeks to follow up on different things that are important to me. I have to stay in my track. You know, I've got like a big business that I need to kind of shift and change, but I can't do that on my own. And I'm continually learning, and things are always changing, and things are always kind of moving. So I think it's like, you know, don't lose the opportunity to make contacts this week and then kind of drive forward with them, in your own track, but keep interested in what's happening elsewhere.
Good advice. Caitlin, last word.
Man, I'm going to give a little bit of a hot take, because it's the end of the day.
Please.
Spice it up a little bit.
That's what I want from you, my friend.
That's why you bring me here, I'm sure. +1 for sure. Also, like, if we're not investing in and really meaningfully improving the products we sell, what is the point? So when that comes to the food system, what I mean there is, like, if a restaurant, if you're saving electricity at your restaurant, but you're not investing that to improve the food and the products you sell, that ain't it. You are missing the point of this whole thing. And so keep the main thing is a challenge we have to all of us. It's really easy when we have those quick wins or get a little caught up to maybe get off track. But none of it actually matters if what we're putting on the table in the hospitality world or the retail or the restaurant space isn't better.
Yeah. I love it. Great way to end. Thank you. Thank you all so much. Give them a round of applause.
Thank you.
All right, y'all. You stuck it through, and now you get to be treated with a reception. I want to thank all the speakers. Please give all the speakers today a round of applause. Thanks to all of those watching online. If there are any comments from our online listeners, please email me at danielle@foodtank.com. For those of you in the room, give yourselves a round of applause. I hope I and the Food Tank team get to talk to you. I just want to go through our partners for this event one more time. They've been incredible. UNEP, London Climate Action Week, Kinisla, PAI, Strong Roots, Compass Group, the Landscape Alliance, the Alliance for Biodiversity International, and SEAT, the Tapestry Foundation, the Institute of Food Technologists, and so many others who made today possible. Thank you to the entire Food Tank team, and thank you to the production team and the staff at Google. I am now excited that we will be joined by Marina Tavolieri, I'm going to mess up her name, Tavolieri, who is an actor and singer who is currently playing Sari Bowles in the award-winning West End production of Cabaret at the Kit Kat Club. Please go see it. She will be outside at the reception serenading us. So thank you all so much, and have a great rest of your week. Thank you.